Hello and welcome to Gamepass Gaming Sunday podcast. I am your host Flap, and as ever, we've got a fantastic show lined up with some great topics and some even better members of our panel that are going to help us through this evening. Let's get straight into it. We've got plenty to talk about, including yesterday's success in the Halo tournament, but perhaps we'll come on to that in a second. But without any further ado, let's welcome to the show Puxley. How are you?
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you doing, Flap? All right?
Yeah, I'm all good, thank you. Buzzing after yesterday's victory. It was always a little bit, we don't kind of know how to pitch ourselves, but thankfully we did quite well. It was a kind of a 6-0 in the end, wasn't it? But
it was quite a nice, I don't want to say a whitewash, but it was, we had some pretty tough games in between, but yeah, it was quite nice to see that we had quite a good streak going on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, there was a few games that I thought, they're going to start pulling it back. But thankfully, we managed to streak ahead. And that's thanks to our next two guests, pretty much permanent members to the show. So let's first introduce Scott, SX2. How are you, sir?
I'm very well. Thank you very much, Flap. Great to be on the show again. I think, actually, we can maybe even call it 7 now because we did have that game that ended very, very quickly that one as well.
That's true.
But no, really good fun yesterday. So, yeah, big shout out to the guys who organised it and obviously the opposition yesterday as well.
No, absolutely. Afterwards. That's a good point, actually. I'll paste a link to our opposition below. It's Xbox Live Party Podcast. Yeah, check out. They've got a YouTube channel and a Twitch channel. So definitely check those out. But they were who we were playing. This is obviously footage from that. But before we move on, Luke, welcome to the show. All good?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, very well. And still reveling in a victory from yesterday, which was nice. And it was nice, in fact, just to actually play like an actual competitive team-based game of Halo rather than when you're usually just on with some randos and it's kind of just you against the world. So that was great, and yeah, it's a great tournament, and hopefully we can continue it.
It was a lot of fun.
Fabio in the chat. Apologies to interrupt, but I've just seen Fabio in the chat. I just see why it's my TV show.
Sorry, Fabio.
Welcome to the chat, Fabio. Yeah, apologies for that. I guess this was always part of the plan, really. To be honest, we'd have done this win or lose. We'd have probably played the footage. So, it's great to have you in the chat. And it was, let's face it, the competition's all about fun. And I think we all certainly had plenty of that. I hope Xbox Live Party podcast did as well. And it's, it's a great thing. Folk Boy, he set all of this up. It's absolutely fantastic. And, to get all these Xbox podcasters together and the panels and the teams and just be able to do something like this is fantastic. And I'm so pleased, that we're part of this fantastic community. So that's pretty awesome. Unfortunately, we were adorned with some sad news this week. IDZ81 sadly passed away. One of the founder members of LordCognito.net, I believe. I never really personally knew him, but I watched the Lord Cognito show this week, and it was really sad, to be honest. And it was a celebration of what a great guy he is, and how this community can come together and actually support each other. And despite we have differences of opinion and things like that, but at the end of the day, we're gamers and we're kind of Xbox gamers. And it's that brings us together, and it's fantastic that we can do things like this. So massive shout out to everyone on the Lord Cognito podcast. Well, thank you, chat, for being here. Got some topics lined up for today. And I think the first one's kind of close to Scott's heart. So perhaps we'll come to you first, Scott, if you don't mind. But I don't know about you. I mean, I've been obviously a Games for Gold subscriber for, I believe, 14 years now. I think it's something like that. I'll have to double check. But so, when they started giving away free games for gold, it's always kind of a cool thing. This is obviously way before Game Pass was even conceived. And, there are some cool games. And the good thing about it is once you've downloaded those games, they are yours. Even if you delete them, you can re-download them again. But over the last, year or so, I think it's fair to say that the interest has been waning slightly in the Games for Gold section. And unfortunately, March was no different. I think this month's lineup is a little lackluster. We've got games that include Warface Breakout, Vicious Attack, Llama Apocalypse, Metal Slug 3, and Port Royale 3. All of which I'm sure have their fan base, and I'm sure there are people out there that absolutely love those games. But like I say, we'll come to you first, Scott. With the recent evidence of the price increase that Microsoft were going to put on Xbox Gold, and then kind of backtracking, do you think they're kind of struggling to know what to do with Gold right now? Is it up in the air a little bit, do you think?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to the rumors last year regarding actual Xbox Live Gold going away at some point, and then obviously that ended up being the actual doubling in price.
Do you think those rumors had some grounding, or do you think they were just rumors?
Yeah, I think they've got. I think there's something in them, and I think personally, at some point in the not too distant future, I'd say within the next maybe 2 years or something, we might see Gold disappear. I think part of the price increase was an attempt to shift more people over to Game Pass Ultimate to make that transition from having Gold to not having Gold easier. I think if they were to cut Gold right now, what they'd essentially be doing is just getting rid of a lot of revenue from the Xbox Live Gold subscriptions, that they won't necessarily have all of that convert over to Game Pass or Game Pass Ultimate, which is where they want those people to subscribe. So I think the price increase was just an attempt to drive more people to Ultimate. So the balance between Game Pass Ultimate subscribers and Xbox Live Gold subscribers was more weighted towards Game Pass. Mm-hmm. And at that point, you can get rid of Gold, I feel. I think that's how it'll go down. And I think, yeah, the price increase was part of their strategy to I guess, speed up that process, speed up that shift across the Game Pass Ultimate. And obviously blew up in their face, unfortunately, in the end. But yeah, I think the whole Games with Gold thing is something that I've been quite vocal about for some time now, and I could rant about this for a long time. So please do interrupt me at any point, anyone.
Go for it.
But I think ultimately it boils down to one thing, and it's that Games with Gold, in some respects, I believe, competes with Game Pass. Mm-hmm. The higher the quality game that goes into Games with Gold, the less of an impact any additions to Game Pass have, in my opinion. So if Microsoft are constantly putting AAA first-party games in Games with Gold on a regular monthly basis, then why would some people subscribe to Game Pass if they know that they're going to get Games with Gold every so often? So I don't feel like they can actually offer significant or big budget AAA games in Games with Gold while they've got Game Pass running. They essentially compete with each other. They offered Gears 5 in February, and that was really, when it boils down, it was just to try and soften the blow of that price increase. There was no other reason for that.
That's interesting. Oh, yeah, I never actually thought of it like that. That's interesting.
Because February they offered 5 compared to their normal 4. And obviously that 5th was Gears 5, and I think that announcement of Gears 5 was maybe the next day or maybe even the same day as the price increase announcement.
Did they actually ever officially announce it? I know it was leaked. There was a photograph of that card in a shop.
Oh, yeah.
Was showing that.
They did, and it, like I say, it completely blew up in their face because they announced it on the Friday, and it was quite late for us in the UK, and by the time I woke up on Saturday morning, they had backtracked on it already. So yeah, they had definitely they made that all official and then backtracked on it ridiculously quicker than I even expected.
It was within a day or two, wasn't it? It was incredibly fast turnaround.
It was the same day. It was the same day.
It was the same day, was it? It was a much needed turnaround. Right. It was a much needed turnaround, though, wasn't it? Because I know it did. It raised a lot of questions in the community, and people weren't happy about it, which I get. But it's a very peculiar thing. So, Luke, come to you perhaps next if we can. Why do you think? Don't you think they've killed it already? I mean, if this thing is kind of on its last legs with Gold, I mean, I've got a plan of what they could do, and I'll share that in a second. But do you think there's something a little further down the line that they're waiting for? Have they got some plans a little further down the line that they're not ready to let everyone know about just yet, or are they just sort of winging it, do you think?
I think I suspect for the moment they're winging it a little bit, and I think what Scott said is probably bang on in that they've got themselves into a position where they seemingly can't offer too much within Xbox Live Gold because they're then directly competing with their own service, and they might dissuade people from from going into Game Pass, which is ultimately what they want to do. I think if they had a long-term plan, it might be to, again, break up Game Pass into tiers and have at some point all your gold members go into some lower tier of Game Pass, if that was to ever happen. But I don't know if they'll do that. I think the only thing that, to me, that I don't understand why they don't offer it more is, I mean, Microsoft have a massive back catalogue of first-party games across multiple generations. And you would think that they would be able to offer something into gold. And in particular, I think, I'm not sure why they haven't started offering things like their service games in there. Because it seems quite natural to me that, okay, and you can't do this all the time because they don't have loads of them, right? But 1 month, why don't they offer something like Sea of Thieves into gold? Right. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but you still have to have a gold subscription. If you download a game on Games for Gold for a month, and then you stop with your subscription, you can't play the game, right? You have to be still subscribed, because that's how it works with PlayStation. PS
I don't think that is the case on Xbox with the Games for Gold specifically. Once you download them and claim them, and then you say go to the silver membership, wwhatever it's called, you still get to keep those games.
God, is that even still a thing? Is silver membership still a thing?
I believe so.
Wow.
That's interesting, but it seems, I just don't understand why they just don't offer something like Sea of Thieves or even, you can't do it right now, or like Grounded when it comes out of early access, because ultimately it will keep people invested in those games and it adds to the player base. For people
and they can generate some cash out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just then generates some goodwill towards Games of Gold, right? Because then you're actually getting, Sea of Thieves is a big game. Grounded's not as big a game, but it's still a cool game to add into it. So I'm not really sure what they're doing. From some of the months you look at it, almost seems like they're trying to turn people off because the offerings are so paltry and so bad that you don't really understand the rationale. And also, I think even if you look at it from a third party perspective, right, there's so many games that they could go out and try and get for gold. So why is it that these a lot of these weird fodder games end up in the service? I just don't really understand what they're doing with it, and I think probably on some level they're not quite sure what to do with it either. So it's a weird situation, and I think it's exacerbated more obviously by the fact that Sony keep offering big months with PlayStation Plus, and that's countered by the fact that obviously you've got Game Pass, right? So there's the offerings in Game Pass are incredible, and clearly Microsoft want to turn people over to that. But at the moment, they're just in this weird limbo state where I'm not sure they know quite what they're doing with it, but I think they know they want to get rid of it down the line. But whether or how and when they do that, I don't know.
Yeah, and they must, Microsoft must have a game plan. That because I don't know what it is doesn't mean to say it's not there or it's not valid or anything. It's just very, like you say, it's very confusing as a user of Game Pass and obviously a previous user of Gold, and to see these sort of disappointing games come in, it does make you wonder kind of what the point is, I guess, in brackets. And it's interesting you bring up PlayStation Plus and PlayStation Now, because obviously I think Games for Gold is kind of compared with PlayStation Plus, isn't it? And as you said, PlayStation Plus for February, it's getting Destruction All Stars, it's getting Control the Ultimate Edition. And Concrete Genie. That's a pretty good month of games there, isn't it? Yeah. And I think so. Out of the two, it seems like PlayStation Plus has definitely got the upper hand on that. PlayStation Now and Game Pass, I guess they're kind of in a similar market, and I don't think many people would disagree that probably Game Pass smashes PlayStation Now out of the park for various reasons. But so I've got and I completely agree. I think that the answer to this, and I'm pitching this, so see what you think. If this gets me a job at Microsoft, then brilliant. So I'm going to pitch this, okay? So they create a lower tier of Game Pass called, I don't know, they could probably call it Game Pass Gold or something like that, just to kind of keep some sort of consistency. It's obviously a lot cheaper. I'll probably keep it a similar price to the current Gold subscription. But what you do is you have either 3 or 4 games in Gold that is a little bit like Game Pass. They're already in Game Pass, so games that are in Game Pass. And it's just basically like a very, very cut down version of Game Pass Ultimate, I guess you'd call it. You wouldn't have xCloud or anything in it. So, you would get the online play like you would do with Gold, but you'd get 4 games from Game Pass that you kind of own for that month, basically. And it could be a random selection of games. So, you do away with the fact that you're going to own these games long term. So essentially, you kind of rent them like you do, but it's just a very cut down version, and it's kind of an entry level, perhaps, to Game Pass, so you can kind of get a feel for the sort of games that you might be getting. Pucks, what do you think on that?
I think that's an interesting take, because I think similar to what Scott was saying. For anyone who's not on Game Pass and those who maybe aren't too interested in playing loads of different games at any one point, but have this kind of tiny catalogue of games which they can keep forever coming out every month, and that does tend to satisfy people. I don't know if getting rid of that and then having a Game Pass equivalent of near the same price for a lot lesser experience is necessarily the way to go. I think you'd have to make your kind of suggestion almost in like the $4.99 a month range. Like you'd have to have it, or maybe I don't know, $5 or $6.99. Like no any more than that, then I think it's not really worthwhile. But I see what you mean about it potentially being beneficial to have a cut down version, so that maybe a lot of people aren't necessarily overwhelmed with a massive catalogue, because maybe that could be like the psychological factor behind it, that some people might just see so many different tiles on the screen of what they can play, they just don't even know what to do and don't play anything. So maybe it could work, but I think the one particular thing you said there was to keep maybe a lower tier at the same or similar price. But if that kind of thing was to happen for real, then I would worry that for the rest of us, the prices would then go up, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
I know in time, as years go on, that we anticipate, Ultimate will go from $10.99 to maybe, I don't know, $12.99 or something, and the majority of us will be perfectly fine with that. But I think there'll be a lot of people saying, well, why are we getting charged more for this new, smaller service? Why not just downgrade the cost of that one, if that makes sense? So I think the suggestion's good, and then I do tend to think of this in terms of what will the consumer think of this in terms of what's it going to cost them, and then what's the value of such a service, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
I'm not trying to rain on your parade, by the way.
No. All valid points. All valid points. And it is interesting to see where it goes. And the games do seem a little kind of silly, to be honest, to kind of drag it out any longer. I just wish they'd be upfront with their long-term strategy, because I am pretty much sure there is one. And it's kind of been quite interesting to see what it is, because it feels like they're dragging their heels on it for a reason. So that's going to be exciting to see what they've got planned.
Yeah, I think again, what Luke was saying, I think is almost like pretty much correct as well, in that they've had this service for a long time, since the 360 days, and now they're kind of in this position where they've got Game Pass. They want people to go onto Game Pass. They're maybe not having the level of subscription onto it as fast as they maybe anticipate or would like. So, as you say, it's kind of in this weird limbo state. But for me, because I wasn't really part of the Xbox One era, most of pretty much all of my Games of Gold experience is solely from the 360 days. And I remember even back then, there were plenty of months where you got maybe some smaller indie titles, or whatever they were called then, arcade titles.
Arcade games, yeah.
Which were, they were okay, not too bad. Might satisfy you for about half an hour or maybe a couple, and then that was it. But then they did have the number of months where they'd have, like, Gears Judgment, for example. Like, for me, that was a game I didn't get at launch. I was in college at the time, couldn't afford to just buy games left, right, and centre. So having a bigger game like that come onto the service was a gold mine for me, and I remember jumping on it and really enjoying it. But in more recent times, apart from Gears 5 last month, I've not noticed any real significant, title that's on there that's really worth me stopping playing my current gen games. Current gen, if that makes sense. Like, because they're so kind of out there. Like, I mean, look at the list now. I mean, as you say, you've got, Metal Slug 3. I think most people of a particular age range have most definitely played this at some point in their gaming life, to the point where, you're not going to miss it if you didn't claim this. But then Port Royale 3, as you say, I haven't even heard of this game. And looking at the cover art, and no disrespect to the game, it could be really good. But I have no, inkling or need to want, or urge, I should say, to want to play this. Just looking at it, if that makes sense. It feels like they're just going through and just picking random numbers from a catalogue out of nowhere and just slapping them on the face of it. So as you say, maybe they're just not putting so much thought into it and just want to get those Game Pass numbers up, and then maybe they'll just scrap it. But I mean, but the toxic side of the community might see this as a negative and then completely slam against it. But hopefully that won't happen if Microsoft were to pull it in the future.
Yeah, it's a very strange situation for them to be in, and like I say, when you're directly comparing to something like PlayStation Plus, it's a woeful service in comparison. So, okay, well, let's see how this goes, because like I say, I can't help feeling Microsoft have a bigger plan. It's just that we're not sure of what it is yet. And I guess when you say, talking about the 360 days, Game Pass didn't exist in those days, so they could probably, afford to lavish us with, some higher quality titles. But very interesting. Okay, no, that's cool. I'm just going to squeeze in a sort of a mid-topic, actually, and it's probably one for Luke and Pux, possibly Scott. Just the rumor of the Nintendo Switch Pro. I'm sure we're all kind of up to speed with that. I'd just like to hear your takes on it, really. Most people seem to feel that they're disappointed that they've only technically sticking in a 720p screen, even though technically it's larger. What's your takes on that? Do you think that particularly matters or not?
Who do you want to go first?
Let's go to Luke on that one first. Sorry.
No, I don't think it matters. I mean, the pixel density you get at 720p on a screen that size is actually really high. Mm-hmm. So, considering that the Switch, I mean, the consideration for anything that goes on with the Switch Pro or the Switch for that matter is always what impact does this have on heat and battery. And those two are linked together. And if you start upping resolution on the screen when it's just unnecessary to do so, you're going to run into, it's going to kick out more heat. It's going to use more energy. That's going to drain battery, which makes the portable function just pointless then, because if you're not getting good battery life, what's the point? So I have no issue with that. The bigger issue I had was what type of screen were they going to use on the Pro, and by all accounts, it's going to use OLED. Which is fantastic. I mean, that gives it a genuine, quote unquote pro/premium feeling. Yeah. And then, I think it's going to be really interesting to see, okay, what, internally, what are they going to do to reach the desired 4K output? And I think I don't think it's going to be a huge boost over the current Switch. I think it will be somewhat significant, but it's certainly not going to be a jump, say, Xbox One to Xbox One X.
Well, I mean, Nintendo aren't shy of incrementally upgrading their handheld devices. I mean, the Game Boy proved that.
Yeah, exactly. And for Nintendo, the one huge benefit they have is that obviously they are powered by NVIDIA, who have shown that native rendering at 4K in particular could very well become a thing of the past. It's not needed because you have DLSS. And if they use DLSS on the Switch Pro, which I'm sure they can do with an upgraded chipset, you're going to be able to get fantastic results going from, say, a 1080p internal resolution up to 4K output. So it's going to be really interesting to see, just how powerful it is on paper and what tricks they're going to use to get it up to 4K, and obviously what the output would be. And I don't know if people have seen some of the kind of DLSS 2.0 results, but
absolutely, control.
I mean, you get results with that are effectively better looking than native 4K, which is just some kind of voodoo magic, really. So, so I'm really excited for it, and it will be a day one buy for if they could produce enough units and actually get it out there, which seems to be a struggle nowadays. It'll be a day one buy for me, but I'm really interested.
It's interesting you said it. I was going to ask you that. So there is that much of a pull for you to actually want these sort of upgrades, even if they are incremental.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even if the internal hardware wasn't a dramatic boost, which I don't think it will be. I think the lure of a 7-inch Nintendo Switch OLED screen would be quite significant for me, because I play probably about 50-50 handheld and docked, so that has a bigger impact for me, say, than it would someone who just plays exclusively docked. But and I don't think I think it will be substantial, but not astronomical. The kind of boost they do. I think it will be, there will be value in it if you look for it and if you want it. Yeah, it'll just be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, that is interesting. Pucks, I'm intrigued to know whether that's whether a Switch Pro is going to be enough for you to want to upgrade from a Switch.
Yeah, I would very strongly consider it. I'm very much in a similar boat as Luke. Yeah, because I mirror much of what Luke said actually. So I think one of the things I would like to add is one of the things again in this rumor mill. Bearing in mind a Switch Pro rumor has been in the works for about the last 2 years now and has been consistently denied by Nintendo. It's only very recently when we've got like a verified source of this kind of stuff has come out and also said this. And I think there's even been further proof that the OLED display is now going to be coming from Samsung, I believe, whereas the originals are LCDs from Sharp, if I remember correctly. And it's smaller details, such as not only is it a slightly bigger screen, it's also OLED, as Luke already said, but it's also going to have like the design of the system is rumored to also be slightly tweaked so that there's less bezel around the edge to also make the screen look bigger, even though it is also bigger, if that makes sense.
I think isn't the format the same? Isn't the physical format the same? They're just squeezing a bigger screen into the same footprint, as it were.
Well, nobody knows, but that is the idea, yeah. And again, as just been mentioned about the 4K output, I mean, because the system on its own won't be capable of 4K entirely, is what is currently rumoured. It's said that the actual 4K kind of upscaling, so to speak, will actually be in the Switch dock itself.
Really?
Yes. Well, because as with a 720p screen, there's no real need, at least as I see it, from someone who works in hardware, it doesn't make sense to have that capability in the system directly because the screen internally on the system running it won't ever need 4K. So it's almost like a waste of space to try and squeeze it into the system. You'd put it onto the chip set which exists within the dock itself and then have the system almost work through a pass-through. At least in my mind, that's how you would do it if this is such a thing. My biggest concern, similar to what Luke was saying about the fact that it's still 720 and not 1080, is people love a numbers game. And a lot of people, especially in the Switch in the Nintendo world, when people who do chase a numbers game, no disrespect to them, again, don't usually have quite an understanding of what they're talking about and think that, why can't you just have this high resolution screen? And it's, and again, I'm not going to repeat everything because Luke's already mentioned it, but yeah, the pixel density for the size of the screen, you don't notice any difference at 1080p. And again, the biggest factor outside of that is battery life, because with a higher resolution display, you're kicking up your CPU clock cycles to render at that higher resolution, and the amount of color data you have to pass through. So again, it's all extra battery stuff as well. So it's a massive juggling act. But then the other thing, which I've also seen rumored to add to this, is apparently there will also be quote-unquote Switch Pro exclusive titles, which this is one that I'm not confident is actually going to be true, because Nintendo did this with the 3DS range. When they released the new 3DS range of systems, and also the new 2DS, which had the higher processing power of the new 3DS, I think they had the Xenoblade game, which was a new 3DS exclusive, and one or two others, but then it just wasn't catching on. So Nintendo just kind of stopped exclusive titles entirely, and then it was a case of the developers just being able to then utilize the extra power of the newer systems, but then still needing to make it work for the older ones. But in terms of, and I suppose the other question you mentioned about, is the upgrade worth it? I definitely think it is, because even though the Switch is very revolutionary, it's good of what it does, it is also 4 years old now, as of 3 or 4 days ago. So it is showing its age in the recent, especially as technology advances so quickly now. And given Nintendo's track record, as you say, of doing upgrades, whether it's a console or mainly handheld, I could definitely see them announcing something maybe later this year. I'd like to hope they do. But yeah, we'll have to see, I guess, because Nintendo always tight-lipped on this stuff, and they always kind of play the hush-hush game until the very last minute, and then out of nowhere, the cards are drawn on some extravagant trailer, and then I'll get excited for it.
Yeah. Scott, are you a Switch owner? Are you a Switch gamer? And if you're not, and I'm not sure whether you are or not, would a Switch Pro be the thing that tips the balance for you to go and actually get one?
I am it, yeah. So I've had one since launch, actually. Cool. So I don't want to repeat too much about what Luke and Puck said, but maybe just a couple of other things to add. And one of my concerns with it that Pucks did actually touch on around how they handled it with the 3DS and the more powerful 3DS. Some of the games on older DS hardware ran awfully because it was quite obviously designed for the more powerful hardware, and they still released it for all of the SKUs, but it ran extreme. I can't remember there's one particular example that stands out. I can't think of right now, but the game just performed so poorly you wouldn't even want to play it, if I'm being perfectly honest. So I hope in a scenario where they support both platforms, that I expect them to, and I would hope they did, that they don't have a situation where games perform so poorly on the older Switch hardware. But I guess maybe at some point that becomes inevitable, depending on how long they plan on supporting the current Switch model. But as someone who plays the Switch exclusively on a TV, I hate the thing in handheld. I absolutely despise it in handheld. It feels it's dreadful to hold.
Me too. I'm pleased you said that. I thought I was literally the only one in the world that thought this.
Yeah.
I feel exactly the same.
Have you played a shooter in handheld?
I have. I played, played the worst possible game. I played Doom 2016, I think it was. And because, I don't have I have the muscle memory for the buttons, but not quite, in the layout where they are actually on the thing. It was atrocious. I mean, I was atrocious. I'm sure that if you get used to it, it's fantastic. But I just don't like the form factor.
I guess if you're coming from, say, an Xbox controller to a Switch, like I am myself, the difference is really off-putting. Like I say, to a point. I've got a Switch Pro controller, so if I'm not playing it on the TV, I'll put it on the stand and I'll play it up with the controller. I simply can't play it in handheld. I think it just feels dreadful. This will never happen, but I would love it if they just released like a small Wii type console without a screen that I could just shove into the TV. I would just play that. I can't see that ever happening. But that would be nice. But going back to the rumors that Puck's touched on as well, it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. Like I say, as someone who plays exclusively on TV, the hardware really does show its age on a 4K TV in particular. I was recently playing, or my girlfriend actually was recently playing Bowser's Fury, and while the game's art style is great and it still has that Nintendo charm and it still looks good, you can't help but just notice that it's being upscaled from such a smaller resolution. It's especially coming from the Series X to the Switch, it is quite jarring, that experience. So hopefully with that additional hardware, and hopefully with use of something like DLSS, it'll just make it look a little nicer, and that alone will probably make me buy one, if I'm being perfectly honest. Like I say, because I only play on TV, I'll probably get a lot of benefit out of it. I don't play it in handheld, so I'm not going to get the benefit of extra battery life, or I'm not going to worry about whether it's a 720 screen or not. But I would instantly notice the difference of playing it on my TV.
I think, I strongly considered getting a Switch at sort of Christmas time and still held off. But I think once the Pro's here, that might be enough to tip the balance for me to take the plunge and grab one, to be honest. So there's probably, there's going to be two markets for this, isn't there? Like Luke and Pucks and possibly not yourself, but, the people that have a Switch and want the upgraded, incremental upgrade aspects to it. And then it might actually appeal to a whole new swathe of people that think, if it's slightly more powerful and, able to do perhaps 4K gaming, albeit upscaled and stuff, be quite interesting. Pucks, we've had some comments come in. Where are we with the comments?
Yeah, I've just been typing something in the chat actually, but I can read out the ones that you've got saved if you want. Mm-hmm. So one here from Dragonwolf, who says, "Could they bring out a Dock Pro for your old Switch?" Now, I actually quite like this suggestion. It's something I didn't actually consider, because I was just answering to one of Matt Burns' questions actually. So I'll read that out first. So Matt Burns says, "I'm curious if the new Switch is just upscaling internally, similar to how a 4K TV upscales 1080p. Is there going to be any benefit?" And also says, "I can't see it having enough hardware power to really do 4K itself." And I think we kind of touched upon this just a minute ago, and I agree with this. I can't see this, as in, again, I can't see the Switch itself having the 4K upscaling capability embedded internally in the system, because it's only a 720p display. It doesn't make logical sense for it to be there. If it is real and it is a thing, it makes perfectly more sense to me to have the upscaling capability in the dock, which is the only place where 4K upscaling would ever need to occur in the instance. And again, actually, I really like the idea of, on top of that, if it is in the dock, then yeah, a dock Pro sounds like a fantastic idea, because it's still running off a NVIDIA Tegra chipset, no doubt. If there's any upgrade, it'll probably go from an X1 to an X2, if at all. And there's going to be very minimal internal changes in the chipset, because it's still part of the same family, to render that, there'd be no real reason why you couldn't have a dock Pro. So no, I really like that idea. But again, with Nintendo, they don't ever really reveal their cards, so we'll have to wait and see, I'm afraid.
Great idea, great suggestion.
Yeah, I actually think any upgrade or potential upgrade will be on the chipset itself on the Switch. And the reason for that is that I think you're right in that the current chip that the Switch uses is a Tegra. I think it's a Tegra X1.
Yes, I believe it is. Yeah,
which is actually a really old NVIDIA mobile chip now. It's very powerful for what it does, but less so now. But in order to get DLSS, you would need tensor cores, which were introduced in NVIDIA's new, from the RTX 20 series onwards. Because it's the tensor cores, which are the actual hardware acceleration that give you DLSS, that enable the kind of deep learning algorithm, etc., to give you the kind of, the crazy upscaling from whatever internal resolution to 4K, which is far, far, far beyond what any TV does, and it's just a pass through, right? It's actually a kind of neural network of learning around an image to reconstruct it to 4K that often looks better than native 4K. So I suspect what they will probably do is they will upgrade the internal chipset to something like a Tegra X1 Plus, or maybe even the new mobile chipset which NVIDIA put out years ago, which is called Mariko. But it won't be, in terms of raw processing power, I don't think it will be a massive leap over what there is now. I think there will be, an uplift. But the main idea will be getting on the chip stuff like the tensor cores so that they can do DLSS properly across multiple different games. So I think that's what they do. I don't know the feasibility of doing a dock. Alone, where you have your old Switch on a dock which has some hardware acceleration in it. I don't know how that would work. So that's why I think Nintendo will probably just go for the simpler option, which is, okay, we'll go for a new chip, but one that's not so advanced over the old one that it's going to cost us a fortune. Because ultimately, right, I think when the Switch launched, Nintendo were probably already making a profit on that hardware, because it wasn't the most ambitious thing they could have done at the time, and they'll want to keep that going, even if they introduce a Pro. And I suspect at some point they might look to start phasing out the old Switch anyway, where the Pro becomes standard deep into the cycle, because of the reasons that we touched on now or before, which is that the older some of the the new 3DS XL games, or the ones that were optimized for that on your normal 3DS, ran so incredibly badly that you would never even go near them, and there was just no point. So you might as well just get the hardware. So I suspect that's what probably happened.
Just out of interest, is it does the NVIDIA Shield run the Tegra?
I think it does. Yeah,
I think it does.
Yeah.
And that's obviously plugs into a TV and can do 4K. I don't know if it's got the X1 in it, but
I think it is the X1. I think they had a newer Shield which had as Luke was saying, as an X1 Plus as well. So, but I don't know the specifics of the Shield.
That can do 4K.
But I just wanted to quickly. So I don't want to stay on the topic for too long, because then we want to move on. But one other thing we haven't mentioned, which I think is also important to why 4K wouldn't be in the Switch, is because, again, we already have the Nintendo Switch Lite, obviously the handheld only version. Yeah. And again, if you're going to have an embedded 720p display, again, that's almost like a backup to why I don't think you'd have that upscaling capability internally. I appreciate what you're saying, Luke, about can't see why you'd have it in the dock, but from my understanding, you're mainly just messing around with a video image coming in from a source, right? So I personally don't see why you wouldn't do it from a dock, but I like your take.
Yeah, but to bolster Luke's point, you would then need two chipsets, which is going to cost you twice as much.
Yeah.
For those
True,
parts.
but then you wouldn't have a Tegra chipset in the dock as well, is what I'm saying. You would have a smaller, almost like an ASIC device, which is only going to be doing that thing.
Well,
Which-
yeah. See, this is the thing, and I meant to bring this up actually. I don't know if you guys have heard. So obviously, DLSS, deep learning super sampling, NVIDIA technology, but obviously AMD have an equivalent. And have you guys heard about it? About the Fidelity FX?
I mean, yeah.
It's like an engine, isn't it? And part of that is the super resolution. Now, apparently, that's coming to Xbox Series X and S as soon as April, potentially. The hardware is obviously in the boxes. It obviously needs a software unlock to be able to probably fully utilize it. And then obviously games will take probably several years after that to perhaps implement it. Although it should be a relatively easy thing for developers to implement, I would think, because it only upscales a lower res image. So I don't think there's a crap ton of coding that's needed. But it does seem like you would need something that has machine learning capabilities, Pucks, and perhaps that kind of chipset doesn't necessarily come cheap at the moment.
Yeah, no, I take your point there. I mean, again, no one knows, right? It's just speculation, but we'll say again. But this, I could say one thing, Lucas say another, you could say a third thing. But Nintendo, knowing Nintendo, they'll do something completely in their field and do something that doesn't make any sense to anyone. But hey, they'll probably still make it work. So.
Exactly. No, that's cool. And to be honest, this was a little topic that I thought I'd squeeze in, and I thought it was a really interesting topic. We seem to have lost Scott, so I don't know where Scott is. We didn't get anything in the private chat either, so we'll let him in. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Welcome, chat. Thank you for being here, Dragon Wolf, Matt Burns. Great. Thank you for watching Pucks and I smash out some Battlefield 5 last night. Really enjoyed that. Carlos the Mara. And we mentioned Fabio earlier on, so thank you for being here, guys. But interesting to see what Nintendo do next.
I think we've got Scott back, by the way.
Oh, yes, we do. Let's bring him back into the stream. There we go. He hasn't got an icon. Are you there, Scott?
My apologies, gents.
Yeah, no worries.
I'm back. I'm not sure what happened there, but for some reason my Firefox has just completely stopped working. So
Wow.
I've had to log in on Chrome, and obviously I don't have anything saved there. So I'll see if I can get my avatar back while we're chatting.
No problem. No, that's fine, my friend. Okay, Doug. I thought there was something catastrophic going on.
Yeah, it was weird when Pucks was talking. All of a sudden, he started sounding like a robot, and then
he does that anyway. To be fair.
And then and then I had to restart my laptop, and now, like I say, Firefox isn't loading up. So my apologies again.
No, that's cool. Actually, while we're here, Luke and Scott, potentially, are you guys up for a Battlefield 5 evening? Live streaming it, perhaps? Yeah, are you Battlefield 5 players?
I was a while ago,
cool.
but I will be terrible now. I will, but I'll give it a bash.
No, that's fine. Like I say, we Pax and I live streamed today. It was good. I don't know, good hour and a half, couple of hours even perhaps. But we had a great time, didn't we? And we had some people watching and commenting and stuff. And there was only me and Pucks in the squad. And obviously, you can have up to 4 in a squad. And Matt Burns said he'd love to join in as well. So if we can kind of get a squad together, it'd be fantastic, and perhaps live stream it. So excellent. Okie doke. Let's move on to the next topic then. And this is one. Where did this kind of topic come from? I think it came from the Bethesda acquisition and things like that, particularly around Game Pass, and just some of the games that we're getting in Game Pass are absolutely phenomenal at this moment in time. So it kind of led me to come up with this topic. But I'm just kind of wondering where Xbox and Microsoft, not so much Microsoft, but Xbox's reputation is right now in the gaming community, and we know it can be quite a toxic community in certain dark corners of the community perhaps, but in general that's not how things are in general with the gaming community. But I think with the Xbox One launch, I think that was probably the lowest point in the Xbox brand history, should we say. But I think they've turned a corner, quite a significant corner actually, and kind of people seem to be excited about the brand and its future again. There seems to be quite a few YouTubers out there that are actually really singing the praises of the Xbox Series X and S, particularly the S in lots of regards, because obviously the price point and things like that. And they're really digging the box, because I think the PlayStation's suffering from a few issues like the controller, sticky buttons. There's some reliability issues, as I know there is with the Series X. And perhaps, Scott, you never actually finished your story with what happened with your Series X. So perhaps we'll come to that. In fact, we'll come to you first if that's all right. So, but perhaps we'll touch on that. But it just seems that, with the launch of these new consoles, and technically, the Series X, it is, a smidge more powerful than the PS5. Whether we'll actually ever see that actual power difference with our own naked eye remains to be seen yet. But it's got some fantastic technology in there. It's got DirectX 12 Ultimate in there, ready and waiting to go. Got huge backwards compatible playlists that the Microsoft and Xbox team are working real hard on, and that enhances frames per second and resolutions and all sorts of things. Got a huge list of first-party studios. Do you think the Xbox brand is in the best shape it's ever been in, or do you think they've still got some way to go to convince the majority of the gaming sector? Scott?
I think they're on the way there. Yeah, they're not.
You don't think they're there
too
yet?
far off. I don't. No, not just yet. I think it'll take maybe another couple of years. I think they've really started rectifying part of the I guess. I think unfortunately that whole narrative that Xboxes will have games still exists for some strange reason to this day.
Well, technically it does exist, doesn't it? Because they still haven't released these huge first-party titles yet. So I guess, technically speaking, that's still correct, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I would still argue that wasn't the case beforehand. They obviously didn't have as many big first-party AAA games as, say, Sony did, but I think that narrative was a bit silly to begin with. I could see where they were coming from, but certainly,
absolutely,
they haven't addressed that yet fully, and that's the Bethesda acquisition hasn't gone through just yet, but also the acquisitions they made back in 2018, we still haven't really seen the rewards of that just yet. The likes of Obsidian and Exile, Playground, the games that they acquired those studios for still haven't come out, and maybe aren't going to come out for another up to 2, maybe 3 years. Something like Wasteland 3 only came out very recently, so their next game is still a number of years away. So I think they are building towards having addressed all those problems, but I think we're probably maybe 2 years out maybe at this point by the time we start seeing some more first-party games come out. That obviously bolsters their Game Pass package as well, and I guess kind of for once and for all puts that narrative to bed. I think obviously if you compare where they were at the beginning of the Xbox One generation, then they're so far away from that. That's like a completely different galaxy almost. They're that far away from that, but they were in really good shape during the 360 era, and I don't know if they're quite there just yet. Obviously, we're talking a long time ago, but they obviously did fantastically well out the gate with the Xbox 360. The hardware was, I guess, very cheap, I think. If I remember correctly, I think it was incredibly affordable, especially compared to today's prices. They were out a year ahead of PlayStation, and because of that, they had a big user base out the gate, and they had a lot of exclusive games, and they had a lot of exclusive third-party content as well. So I don't think they're quite there just yet, but I think they'll certainly surpass that in the next say, 2 years.
No, absolutely, I agree. And to be honest, they do have some pretty cool IPs. I think they screwed up with Crackdown 3. And we know they screwed up with that. I mean, that's hardly a surprise to anyone. But I really liked the Crackdowns series, particularly 1 and 2. I thought they were brilliant. I even really enjoyed 3. But obviously, the whole constantly getting delayed, and it wasn't. It's not the prettiest game in the world and stuff, but as an IP goes, let's take the game itself out of the equation. As an IP, I think it's a great IP, and I just don't think they ploughed enough time, effort, love, and money. Perhaps not money, but just time, love, and effort into that particular project. It seemed, I'm not quite sure why that one went as wrong as it did. And I know it's ridiculous to compare something like Crackdown to Last of Us and things like that. I know they're completely different things, but it does go to show from a platform holder perspective how far Sony, hold some of these fantastic IPs dear to their heart and stuff. Luke, perhaps we'll come to you. Is it fair to compare Xbox first-party titles to Sony ones? Is that a fair comparison, do you think? Or do you think Microsoft will and should cut their own way through this? Because, no one really compares PlayStation and Nintendo games. That just doesn't really happen, and for various reasons, because obviously Nintendo have their own sort of style and what they do. So is there room for a third style for Microsoft, do you think? Or do you think, PlayStation and Xbox will always be compared from first-party title perspective?
I think a bit of both. So I think they will always be compared because they are. I mean, no matter what Microsoft will say a number of times, they are the most direct competitors of each other, whereas Nintendo are, whatever Nintendo are, they're just something completely different. And they don't even try and compete in the same sphere of genres of games anyway. Nintendo put out Nintendo games, and those are the games they put out, whereas Microsoft, I think there is a bit of a third way that Microsoft are doing, which is that kind of big mix of genres and styles and size of games, which Sony don't do. I mean, they typically
they don't seem to have a service game, do they, Sony?
No, not really. I suspect that will change. I suspect they will have something like that, but I don't think they have one, probably because they know that the people that are buying exclusive Sony games, by and large, aren't looking for that. I don't think that third-party stuff can plug that gap for Sony, albeit I think they will have something like that. And I suspect the game that will be that for Sony going forward, not to make this about PlayStation, but it will be something like Factions, like the will probably be standalone or something like that. So, but for Microsoft, I think they will always be compared to the output, and they will continue to be compared, I think, negatively until they start putting out, the kind of consistent, highly rated games, which I'm sure they will do. I've got no doubt about that. And it's, the thing with Microsoft for the last few years has just been getting themselves into a place where they've got good consumer goodwill, which they didn't have at the start of this generation.
Yeah.
It's taken them a long time to recover from. Have a good, be competitive in their price and their service, which they clearly are now. They're extremely competitive with all that. And then the final step has always been, okay, now it's time to start putting out big AAA games on a consistent basis. And if you look back at the first party they held at the beginning of the gen, it was essentially 343, Turn 10, and maybe 2 or 3 others, including Mojang, and that was it. So now you've got this huge stable of first party, and they're not all going to put out AAA games, obviously, but a vast majority of them probably will do. And there'll be different kinds of games, but I think it's just that deliverance phase now, the execution phase, I think Microsoft have called it, where they start to deliver these games en masse, and that's going to start when Halo launches, and that's an incredibly important game for them because it's kind of the new generation of Microsoft studios, essentially. That's the first big game, unless they have maybe a Forza they can slip in there beforehand or something of that ilk. And after that, you should get a steady release of big games, and it's at that point we'll see how successful this has all been for Microsoft. And I think they're going to be successful with it, because I think if you've got that much talent and that much money and time to build these studios up and develop them and allow them to create the games they want to create, and you look at the slate of games, at least on paper, that they have coming out, when you've got a Perfect Dark, a big budget Fable, Avowed, you've got all whatever Bethesda are making, in addition to Starfield, etc. It's going to be an incredible time to be an Xbox gamer, and I just hope that the quality is up there, which again I think it will be. I think it's fair for them to be compared until they start putting out kind of the consistent 90 Metacritics or 85 Metacritics that Sony do.
I think you raise a very good point, actually. I think there is a third way. I think you're right. Perhaps Microsoft will find this third way. And if you're new to the conversation, welcome to the chat. We were just sort of explaining or asking the question. Obviously, Nintendo and PlayStation don't really have their games compared because they're just different animals. And is it time for Microsoft to kind of find their own way and kind of try and distance themselves from always being compared to PlayStation and stuff? And I think you're right. I think perhaps the services game is something that Microsoft may be the platform to play on. Not, like you say, not that you wouldn't necessarily have third-party service games like Fortnite and stuff, but to be honest, they tend to be cross-generation, cross-platform anyway. So, if service games was your bag, you'd probably be better off with the Xbox, because you'd be able to get all of the third-party ones, plus games like Grounded and Sea of Thieves and stuff. But I don't know about you, but it feels to me like Sea of Thieves and Grounded isn't just a cash grab. They feel like very playable games without having to put the skins and stuff on. It doesn't seem like, it's heavily pushed for you to sort of pay for new skins and stuff. It is about the experience. I know that's where they make their money with this sort of thing, but perhaps Microsoft is the platform to sort of host these huge servers. And of course, having things like the Azure racks of servers out there probably assists with all of that as well, I guess. But Pux, I've got an interesting question for you. Do you think the lack of people being able to get hold of PlayStation 5s at this moment in time, do you think that's actually working in Microsoft's favor? Because, there is a lot of good press around, and people that are sitting on the fence might consider actually, when these consoles are available, perhaps I'll go for the Series X instead. If certain games are ticking their boxes with things like Elder Scrolls or Fallout, obviously the Bethesda acquisition and stuff. Do you think the lack of PS5s might actually slightly be working in Microsoft's favor at the moment?
I think it could definitely be a factor. Because one of the things I've seen more recently as well, mainly just through my Twitter feeds and people sharing links and stuff, is kind of well-known PlayStation YouTubers and stuff praising things like Game Pass. I know we talk about it to death, and for very good reason, because we see it as good value. And I think after almost half a year now of having these new next-gen, well, now current-gen systems on the store shelves, I think a lot of people are starting to see the value as well, even if you're on the other side, so to speak. But I think it's weird when you talk about, people say that Xbox has no games and that kind of argument, because a lot of the argument obviously comes from the toxic side of fanboys, and obviously mainly the PlayStation side. But then my view of all of it really is that I think both consoles are in the same boat regardless. Neither console has any real stellar standout next-gen only title that you must have, if you know what I mean.
Not at the moment. No.
Not at the moment. Which is why I'm wondering if, given the amount of months that have gone by, people so far are, quote, having to make do, so to speak, with playing old games, again, quote unquote. And that goes for both systems, right? So, and I think there's so many people who are, I've seen the toxic side of things on Twitter on the PlayStation side. Again, that console has no games or whatever else. But then both sides are still playing older titles. Both sides are also playing upgraded titles of last gen to current gen. And in some cases, on the Sony side, we're seeing instances where you don't get a free upgrade and you now have to pay $70 to play that. And I think it's in those instances when people are seeing the value of things like Game Pass and smart delivery. Sorry, go on.
Well, no. You raise a very good point, and I guess if you only watched the Sony State of Play, because they've always made a lot of a big point of saying that you get this upgrade for free, which obviously to me implies that every time they don't say that means it isn't free, if you see what I mean. So if you watch that in isolation, you might think that's the norm. But, there's a lot of instances, like you say, where Xbox gets the upgrade for free and things like that. So, not all games, obviously something like Control Ultimate Edition, that's a little bit of a upside down thing, isn't it? Because obviously Control Ultimate Edition is coming to PlayStation Plus, whereas the version that's in Game Pass is obviously the not Ultimate Edition. So there are anomalies, I guess. But I guess if you was to watch all of the Sony paraphernalia in isolation, you wouldn't necessarily know that Xbox offers some of these upgrades, or a lot of these upgrades, for free, actually.
That's a good point, actually, because I think it was I think it was just before system launch, wasn't it, or console launches, where I think Microsoft had part of their presentation which was solely marketing smart delivery. Like, this is the thing, and these are all the games that you can upgrade from Xbox One to Series, whatever. But as you say, if you watch any of these things in isolation, like, as you say, the State of Play that was on recently, I mean, there was obviously one new title or brand new reveal on there, as well as updates on other titles. But then obviously what's more interesting now on the Sony side is that a number of titles are also now coming to PC, mainly via the Epic Games Store. So, Sony, I believe, are now also embracing the fact that they have, a whole market of PC players exists, which are never going to buy a console because, PC Master Race and all that kind of stuff. And the PC is a good market. PC players still want to play these games. Microsoft are starting to leverage it. And I think outside of console wars and which should I get and what has the better games or not, it's the fact that if it's all coming to a system that everyone can take part in anyway, I mean, assuming you have a capable enough PC, then I think in a way both companies are catering for everyone as much as they can. Obviously, they're trying to get their market share of players, and they're going to both want to strive for dominance because that's business. But
Absolutely.
at the end of the day, I think they are playing well together in that they're trying to push for as many people as they can, and it's not just about the consoles anymore. It's also now wanting to get players to just play the new games which are coming. And I think that's also a testament to the fact that both new systems are effective. They are just custom-built PCs, aren't they? I mean, and the fact that developers are building for these basically high-end PCs, porting is almost a simple. I know it's not a simple process, but it's a lot simpler than it is to convert everything in the game to run on a whole new platform. If you get what I mean.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I do. And like you say, there's always going to be bias for one platform over the other and stuff. It's the huge middle ground that I think that could be persuaded. And like I say, there are lots of YouTubers out there that seem to be favouring Xbox, and perhaps there is a little bit of a seesaw thing going on between the two major platform holders, shall we say, or the ones that compete directly, as in Sony and Microsoft, and each generation the other one seems to slightly have the upper hand at a certain point in the generation, and it just feels like a lot of the momentum is swinging in Microsoft's favor at the moment, certainly compared to the Xbox One. Scott, we'll come to you. So we've got some fantastic titles in Game Pass. We've got some real good sports titles. I think you mentioned about Football Manager, actually, didn't you?
Yeah.
Are these still continue? I'm a veteran Game Pass subscriber, and I assume everyone on the panel is. Are you still being absolutely blown away and surprised by the quality of some of these titles that we get and how fast we're getting them, like Dirt 5, for instance?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because we've kind of been spoiled for so long now, where you kind of no longer surprised when a big game comes to Game Pass, and really at the moment we're not even anywhere near when it's going to be at its best. Luke mentioned earlier, it kind of starts with Halo Infinite, and then over the next few years,
yeah,
we're
that's
going
true.
to have so many big first-party games coming to Game Pass day and date. But Dirt 5's a really good example of a game that I think's come to Game Pass a lot earlier than I would have expected. That only came out in November. And it's already in Game Pass, so we are seeing some games, third-party games, come to Game Pass quite quickly. But I'm not that surprised these days, but I don't mean that in a negative way. I think that's just because we've been so spoiled for so long, and we continue to get spoiled, that it's never really a surprise when a big game comes to Game Pass. I mean, every single month when they release the games that they're going to be bringing out, I'm pleased with it every single time. There's never been one month that I can recall, at least, where I've looked at the list of games coming to Game Pass and I've thought, I'm not going to play any of those. No, I can't recall a month where that's happened. So yeah, it's just nice every month knowing that the subscription that we've got at the minute is going to just continue delivering new games, and because of that, I'm getting to play games and experience genres that I wouldn't have typically played. Dirt 5, something I've been playing quite a lot recently, and I wouldn't have picked that up if it wasn't for Game Pass, because I maybe would have played Forza Horizon instead. But because Dirt 5 was good, or looked good at least, I thought, I'll give that a shot. And then a couple of mates have jumped on there as well. So word of mouth is obviously quite big with Game Pass as well, I think. So, someone starts playing on Game Pass and tells their friends that it's good, even if they don't have Game Pass, they may subscribe to Game Pass, or may end up going and just buying the game themselves and play with their friends. So, yeah, not surprised at all, mate, if I'm being honest, but I mean that in a good way, because it's just Microsoft are continually delivering and have done so on such a consistent basis that it's hard to be surprised, I think, at this point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to come to you next, Luke, if that's okay, to come back to a previous point you had, perhaps one of the other things, because I think Matt's just raised quite a good thing. He said, name 3 major PlayStation exclusives with good online mode. Perhaps that's another, feather in Microsoft's cap with things like we're watching now, the Halo online multiplayer side of things. And I think Microsoft are quite multiplayer focused, or they certainly were. And obviously, game services like Grounded and obviously Sea of Thieves and things like that, heavily multiplayer focused. Perhaps that's another thing. I was a little bit miffed that actually the control that came to Game Pass wasn't the Ultimate Edition, and the NBA 2K1 wasn't the next gen version. I'm guessing that's a sign of, like Luke says, we're kind of a little bit like spoiled children at this point with Game Pass, and kind of just sometimes forgetting the fantastic value it actually is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think on Matt's point in the chat, I think he's right. I mean, Sony in the past have had those types of games. I think everybody remembers stuff like, I think you mentioned it, like Twisted Metal that was on PS3, and there was stuff like Warhawk and Starhawk, etc., which were awesome multiplayer only titles. And for me, it's not a big deal because I'm not really, apart from one or two multiplayer games, I tend to play more single player. But Sony have said in the recent past actually that it is something they want to do more of, and that they should do, because it's good to have variety of titles, right? And I think with stuff like Last of Us Factions, which will come out, I'm sure that will be quite ambitious. There's been a lot of rumors for a long time that Guerrilla are making a second game which will be multiplayer focused. So I think they are doing that, but again, that's going to take them time to bring out. And I think on the Game Pass point, I think you're right. I was actually really looking forward to playing NBA to see the next gen patch, and it wasn't, which is disappointing. And then you kind of take a step back, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, but you're still getting the game in your subscription, right? You're still getting all of these games in your subscription. There was a similar, I think, outcry of disappointment when Sony announced that Final Fantasy VII was coming to PlayStation Plus in this month, I think. I think it's this month. But that won't have a PS5 upgrade option. So it will just be the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 4 Pro version. And when the PS5 upgrade version hits, you won't be able to get that from your PS Plus download game, which I think is essentially, it's essentially the same state as stuff like NBA 2K21 and those games. It's frustrating, but also it's kind of like, well, we do, especially on Game Pass, you get a lot anyway, right? You get an incredible amount of value, and that's only going to grow. I mean, the day that Microsoft, fully complete the Bethesda deal, and then probably within a short time frame go, here you go, here's all the back catalogue of Bethesda games on Game Pass now, and then even stuff in the kind of shorter term, stuff like Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo, which obviously aren't going to come to the Xbox for a little while, but they're going to hit as soon as they're allowed to be on that service. They're going to hit there, and then that's going to add incredible value again. So Microsoft have a great thing with it.
No, absolutely. And it is funny you should say about the Bethesda deal. Perhaps we'll talk about that in a little bit, actually. And some of the games that are still yet to have a next gen upgrade. I've got a list of those that we can go through. But Pux, did you feel it was hard done by about MB2K1 not being the latest gen version and Control Ultimate?
I'll be perfectly honest. I do not enjoy sports games at all, and I never really have done. So It doesn't really bother me at all. I appreciate there's a lot of players out there that do love sports games, so I definitely appreciate that they'll feel it. Doesn't seem to make much sense, as you say, but I can't really comment it too much I don't really follow it. So, but in terms of control,
makes me wonder why they didn't get the next gen upgrade. Do you reckon that's do you reckon that the devs or the publishers just didn't want to give that away technically, for free in inverted commas, or?
I'd argue that's probably definitely the case, and similar to as you say about Control Ultimate Edition, because I think effectively, the thing about Game Pass is that Microsoft or / the Xbox division rather don't necessarily have a like a set policy on how it works and what it should or shouldn't do. They're currently quite flowy in terms of what works for one dev or one group of devs. Like smaller devs, they might say that they'll pay them a percentage of downloads, or bigger ones. I think for Kingdom Hearts, all of the Kingdom Hearts games which are on Game Pass, for example, I think Microsoft actually went out of their way to pay Square Enix for the rights to put it on there and stuff like that. So Microsoft seems to be doing almost like a give and take between what they believe is value, what people want to play, and what they're willing to go for. And the other side of the coin is that people want their games to be on Game Pass, so Microsoft tried to string a deal with them. That seems to be the way they're doing it. And I kind of feel that maybe the devs of Control, maybe they specified maybe they wanted more money for the Ultimate Edition to go on the service, and Microsoft maybe refused, and that's why we don't have it. I don't know. But I kind of feel that because of knowing that that's how Microsoft is currently on working with Game Pass in terms of setting, there's no set in stone process for it, then maybe that's the reason why. I'm guessing maybe it was the devs rather than Xbox or Microsoft, not wanting to put it on there, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And at the moment, it feels like Microsoft are going to the devs and the publishers saying, would you like to have your game on our service? Where I think at some point in the future, when Game Pass is as synonymous with games as kind of Netflix is with sort of streaming TV, it will actually be the developers and the publishers coming to Xbox saying, we'd love to have our game on your service. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I can definitely see that being what will happen, and if anything, I'd like that to happen because I'm if you're talking about Netflix now, I mean, when that first came out, and there was you have your first jump, like your main beta testers, the ones that go in full hog at the beginning of the service, all the rest of it, and bear in mind, obviously, I know when it first started, it was more of a DVD rental service, but that's it by the by. But then. Look at it now. We're talking like 10 years, 10 years later from when Netflix first kind of really started in the streaming space, and streaming's effectively wiped out DVDs. So I'd like to think in a way that something like subscription models like Game Pass and whatever competition brings that later on, perhaps, is the future in the long term. But I know one of the things I saw in the comment earlier from Matt Burns actually was about. Okay, the comment was about Nintendo and game preservation, but I think people will approach game services like Game Pass with that mindset as well, as in because you don't physically own the games or you can't contain it anywhere, then once those titles are off the service, then they're not preserved, and then the preservation is in the hands of the publishers of the service or the developers. Sorry, and I think for the most part we know that once a game is off the shelves, they can be very hard to come by, and you have to rely on things like eBay. So. I don't know if it will catch on as much as I'd like it to, but there's reasons. I understand the reasons for that, if you get what I mean. Because I think it's more than just will people jump onto it, yes or no. But I think there's going to be a very strong subset of people who will want to still have those physical copies, still want to go out and just buy the game rather than subscribe to a service for sole purposes like preservation, for example.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I wonder if there will ever be, it might even exist, but I'm wondering if there will ever be a digital archive for games, like a library, look like the British Library, as it were, but for games that, where they literally store these games for prosperity. But it's an interesting point there, because like you say, sometimes, these things can be lost forever. It's an interesting point.
I think just to maybe add something to what Puck said there, Flap, and maybe just touch on something you mentioned there. I don't know if you recall, fairly recently there was a massive project to preserve all the old Flash games after Flash got discontinued. I think there's a massive archive of Flash games. Right. I think you might see that. But I think often when we talk about Game Pass, and especially the comparison from Game Pass and Netflix, which is a very, very common comparison, I think sometimes what a lot of people forget is Game Pass is just an option. With Netflix, you can only stream the TV shows. You can only stream the movies. There is no alternative. But with Xbox, Game Pass is just one option that you as a consumer has. If you don't want to subscribe, cool. You don't have to. You can go and buy that game physically from the shop. You can download it digitally, so you own that game if you want. And I think that's one of Microsoft's key strengths is you've got those options to go whatever route you want to go down, and they're going to just give you as many options as you want for you to choose. I don't think we'll see a future where you can only access Microsoft's games via Game Pass. I don't think you'll ever see a scenario where a Bethesda game you have to subscribe to Game Pass to play it. You'll always still be able to buy it either physically. I mean, you could argue in the not too distant future everything will be digital anyway, but you'll at least still be able to buy the game without having to subscribe to Game Pass to play it. And I think that's a key distinction between the two as well, that I think a lot of people sometimes forget. I think sometimes they kind of just think that's the only way you can play these games. It's like, no, you've got to remember there's a couple of different pillars to Microsoft's approach. And the subscription is just one of them.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And to be honest, I prefer thinking of it as a rental service of Game Pass, because it is just a rental service, isn't it? Like you say, you never actually own the games. So you are renting it from whoever for that period of time until Microsoft decide to take it off. But yeah, like you say, that game will then exist elsewhere. But A really interesting topic, that one. I was quite pleased with that because that kind of took us down a path I wasn't quite expecting. But no, that's really cool. Chat, thank you very much for being here. Got some regulars in the chat, so great to see you. We play our next game or next round of the Halo tournament next Saturday. I believe we're aiming for 5 p.m. That may change. As you see, we are playing midweek mix-up with Wandering Dutch. So, and we've made it through to the quarterfinals, boys. We can safely say we're into the quarterfinals, even though it only took one game to get there. But and if we are successful Saturday, we will either be playing Xbox 448 or Boom. That will be an interesting one. I'd love to see a Green Pass gaming versus a Boom lineup. That would be pretty awesome. Would love to see that, but I think Dragon Wolf's going to do his best for that to not be the case. It's going to be an interesting set of games. So we're limbering up. Commiserations to everyone that didn't make it through, and in all honesty, they might be commiserating us next week. But it's all about the fun, and we had loads of fun playing it. So bring it on. Okay, let's move on to a third topic. Team Xbox, they were asking publicly what products they would want from Xbox fans in the future, and I thought it was quite an interesting topic. And I've got one that's probably of no surprise to most people. I'd love to see a Elite Series 3. I think we mentioned it a show or two ago. I think that's probably a given. We'll probably at least hear about that by the end of the year, I think. But Luke, perhaps we'll come to you first. Is there anything specific that you think is missing from the Xbox lineup, hardware-wise and product-wise? Is there anything that you'd like to see the team working on?
I think the only thing I'd like to see them working on, which I think we discussed briefly a few shows ago, is a kind of Elite Series headset. So I know they've just announced the new Xbox headset, but I'd like to see them do something a bit more premium than that. You know, like the Elite with higher end features, and I think that would be probably really successful for them, and I reckon it would be really good because they're good at making hardware.
Well, what do you think the Elite features would be? Are we talking sort of extended battery life and stuff, or?
Yeah, I think you'd have stuff like extended battery life would be one, if you can. Obviously, improved build quality all around, premium construction. I'd even like to see potentially maybe something like ANC, like active noise cancelling.
I was going to say that. Do the I'm guessing the £100 ones don't have any active noise cancelling at all?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
So, and it's usually a quite expensive thing that you don't see on gaming headsets, but it's actually it can actually be really good. Or stuff like, I mean, if you really want to go premium, which they could do because certain manufacturers have done this, is have stuff like planar headphones or open back headphones, which I think Audis are doing some at the moment. I'd like to see them tackle something like that because I think it'd be quite interesting. And as with any piece of hardware they tend to make, it's always really high quality no matter what the price. So I'd like to see what they did. You know, you look at the Series controller, right, and the minute you pick that up, you can tell it's worth the price that you pay for it. It's
it feels quality.
And it has issues that, you know, both versions have had issues, but you know, it's still a really good product. So I think that's what I'd like to see. I'd also, as you said, I'd like to see a new Elite controller.
I'm just wondering what that could have. I mean, I'm conscious that the Elite Series 2 doesn't have a share button, but I'm not spending another 160, 180 quid for a share button. That's not happening. So it's going to need to offer a lot more, isn't it?
I know they did that survey a while back, didn't they? Or not a while back, fairly recently, which was they were asking people how much they might want certain features, and some of the features I think were what the DualSense is doing. So I don't know whether you could introduce those kind of features on an Elite Series, but then again, I don't know if you would, because then you kind of, if you're developing a game, you can't really develop around different controllers in that sense, right? Because it's not a ubiquitous controller. So I don't really. I think I'm in your camp, which is I don't really know what they could do for a new Elite series, other than the share button and probably bigger battery, better battery life. But yeah, I'm not really sure, but I'd like to see it.
Yeah, no, and it's quite encouraging that they're actually asking, because there's obviously something afoot, and perhaps the team that were dealing with the headset and stuff have essentially finished that project and looking for a new one. So it's great that they're asking the question. Scott, anything particular that you'd like to see hardware wise?
I'm not too, I think we talked about this last time I was on the show, and I think the one thing that I think is maybe missing at this point, and I think you will maybe plan to talk about a little bit later as well, is maybe a VR headset. I think I would. I'm not. I don't have an Elite controller, so I can't really comment on that. I do want one, but I would probably just get the existing one. And maybe just see a slight refresh of the existing Series 2, where they add a share button and leave it at that. Maybe improve the build quality a little bit more as well. But I think, the one thing that's possibly missing, especially when you consider Sony have just come out recently and announced the PSVR 2 coming next year, is that's a space that Sony have basically got all to themselves, at least in the console space. I know obviously PC is still very much where VR is at, but that is something that Sony definitely seem to have locked up. And there are a number of VR games that I would really like to try, like
Half-Life Alex. Go on, say it.
Alex would definitely be one. I was a big Half-Life player.
Oh, me too. I love Half-Life so much.
My original game in history started with Half-Life, Counter-Strike, Team Fortress on an old PC that I built. Yeah. And things like Beat Saber, Phasmophobia, games like that you hear a lot about, and unfortunately you can't very easily experience them at the moment if you don't have a decent PC rig, and then sometimes a rather expensive hardware. I think the only way of getting that at the moment really is maybe an Oculus. And I know that the Quest 2 is fairly popular, but also you've then got to get yourself into bed with Facebook if you want to go and use that. So I think that's one area I'd like them to maybe delve into a bit.
Well, we mentioned this a long time ago, and I'm still holding out. I'm not going to waver from the fact that I agree. I think Microsoft will use a third-party VR like Oculus, probably Oculus. If they need to schmooze Microsoft, Facebook, sorry, then so be it. But it would be beneficial to both parties. I think there would be a huge benefit to Facebook to allowing Microsoft to use that product and make games for it as well.
Yeah, I don't know why they couldn't just similar to Windows. Obviously, Windows has Windows Mixed Reality, and you can get a variety of different headsets of varying quality and price ranges that work with Windows Mixed Reality. And I wonder if it's just something where they could just say, hey, look, if your headset works with Windows, then it works with Xbox. I don't know how difficult that would be.
No, I completely agree. And without wishing to dive off the topic too far, I will just throw this in as an aside. But did we see about the mesh mixed reality platform that Microsoft were talking about earlier this week? And not only the fact that there is a mesh mixed reality, which is basically where multiplayer can share an augmented reality, as it were. You can actually do it from any device. You don't necessarily need a headset. So you could do it from a phone. I know it sounds a little crazy, and it might not fit completely into a game platform at first, but imagine a coffee table in a living room, and someone's got a VR headset on, someone's got an AR headset on, the kids have got their mobile phones, and you're all able to see this 3D image on the table that's obviously not actually there, but everyone can see it using their device. And the platform that Microsoft are putting forward for that is called Mesh. And I think that's a really exciting potential for AR and VR games, because we did a section on last week's show talking about where is Microsoft's VR, and we were saying about how much of a lonely experience it is VR. But actually, if they could implement this mesh system, that would be fantastic, because you could actually involve everyone who's got any kind of device. And Microsoft are all about let's use any device that you've got, as they've proved with xCloud. So I think that's a fantastic. Did you guys hear about Mesh, just out of interest?
I did see a little bit about it. I kind of got the impression it was more tailored towards business, if I'm being perfectly honest. Maybe I misunderstood, but I saw a lot of productivity stuff with Teams integration and things like that. With the exception of, I did see the Pokemon Go HoloLens demo, which I know my little one would absolutely love if he could get his hands on that, but I believe that headset's a couple of grand, so that won't be happening anytime soon. But yeah, I kind of got the impression it was more business oriented, so I didn't pay too much attention to it, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think that's how they're pitching it at the moment. But I think we'd all be remiss if we didn't think Xbox, the Xbox division, didn't have their eye on that, and also maybe a slight driving factor behind it. Because I think if Microsoft can get this mesh up and working from a business perspective, then there's not too much of a leap of the imagination to get it into the gaming sphere. If they're able to do that, it'd be fantastic. I remember. What was it called? What was the Microsoft Glass? What was their version of Glass?
That was HoloLens.
HoloLens, yes.
Yeah.
I remember seeing HoloLens, and they kind of had Minecraft basically on this table, and they could walk around it and zoom in and kind of go into the world. And it's like, oh, that's fantastic. So that could almost kind of exist.
That demo blew people's minds at E3 because it was kind of
it was a few years ago now as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a long time ago. I think it was kind of like the first look at sort of AR in that setting, and I think everyone saw that and they were amazed. And obviously it didn't really go anywhere, but it did show some real potential that AR had and may still have and might be realized in the future, but unfortunately it hasn't quite panned out maybe as they expect. But yeah, that demo was mind-blowing. If anyone hasn't seen it, I definitely recommend looking it up, because it was bizarre seeing something just completely different, and they had special camera equipment so they could push out the feed. It was pretty good.
They're very, Microsoft, very innovative. So I'm not surprised that we haven't seen it yet, because that was probably the dark, deep recesses of their R&D department. And like you say, it's not come to fruition yet, but I certainly think it will. Pux, we haven't heard from you for a little while. Any specific Xbox hardware that you'd wish that they would consider and create?
Nothing that hasn't been said, if I'm perfectly honest.
Okay.
As you said about, I don't think there's much more that Microsoft could do in terms of like a new controller or anything like that.
Well, you say that. There's someone in the chat. Myseko?
Sorry, where am I looking? Ah, yes. Sorry, I have this saved. I'll read this out because this is not quite the controller I was thinking of.
No.
But yes, this is different. So, Myseko did say earlier, hardware-wise, they would like to see... Sorry, they would buy a I'll start again. Microsoft said that hardware-wise, they would buy a Microsoft Flight Stick for use on Xbox, obviously, in terms of Flight Simulator. When I thought that was that's a fantastic idea, because you only have third-party solutions at the minute for flight sticks for the game on PC, and they cost thousands, or they can cost thousands, I should say. So I really like that idea.
No, I think that's a fantastic idea.
100%. Again, things like flight sticks. I mean, if we're talking just like you could get like the £20 or $20 or whatever it is sticks that just sit on your desk and you just kind of twiggle them a little bit, then that's fine. But I think Myseko's referring to the big setups where you've got the proper double-handed, where you can pull in and out, twist, button panels, all the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, there is a market for that. There is a large PC market for that I think has probably tailed off slightly, because obviously there hasn't been such a new version of Microsoft Flight Sim for a long time, obviously, until recently. But what they tend to do is make those very modular. And I used to own a Microsoft Flight Stick. I mean, it was Microsoft branded. I'm guessing they didn't make it. They might have done. So, it's something they've done in the past. But that's a fantastic point, because, they really want to push Flight Sim, and it's coming out on the Xbox Series X this summer, I believe. So it's almost like a soft second launch and stuff. And if they could sell, it's probably a bit late in the day unless they've already got it up their sleeve. But if they could, get a product out that kind of assists with that, I think that would sell pretty well with some of the Flight Sim enthusiasts.
Can I just add? I have made a bit of a mistake there, and we've made up our own one, because I misread fight as flight. Myseko wants to buy a fight stick. Not a flight stick.
No, I read that as a flight stick. Wow, we both made the same error.
Sorry, Myseko. Yes. Okay, we'd all like to see a flight stick, but I definitely also agree it'd be cool to see Microsoft also make their own fight stick. Yes, I agree with that as well. That'd be quite cool.
You know, like an arcade stick.
Yeah, like Street Fighter and Tekken, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we might see that if they go back to Killer Instinct at some point in the future.
Yeah, that's true.
They have obviously, it's been some time since they went there, and I think listening to the Xbox 2 podcast recently, I think Microsoft want to do something with Killer Instinct, but maybe just can't find the studio. So maybe if we get back to Killer Instinct being a thing, then they might have a first party fight. I almost said flight there, fight stick in their accessories bundle as well.
Yeah, like an arcade controller. That would be fantastic. I mean, that's not anything new, really, but it's certainly something that Microsoft don't offer at the moment. So, yeah, that would be a great idea. But having said that, I think a flight stick as well. Like you say, they did used to make their own yokes and stuff, and they could make it modular. You could have all kinds of panel equipment. I mean, I don't know if Microsoft would want to quite go into that level. They're probably happy to leave that to the third party, but they could certainly come up with a controller for flight sim that did most of the things. Do you know what I mean?
Mm. One thing I would like to add, just as a separate topic entirely, I mean, just a quick one on what I would like to see. I'm still interested in trying VR, so like Scott mentioned, I'd like to see what Microsoft would do with VR if they ever decide, as you say, team up to Facebook and what you said earlier. But another thing is because even now in the gaming space, there's issues with like accessibility and stuff. And Microsoft have obviously got their accessibility controller, which they've pushed very hard, and that's been integrated into all sorts of different households and reworked with even different platforms as well, which I find impressive. So I'd be interested to see rather what Microsoft would do to improve upon their current accessibility offerings, if you get what I mean. Because currently,
that's a great point, because that is a fantastic offering, and for the life of me, I can't remember what it's called now. Much to my shame, we did a whole topic on it, didn't we?
Is it just called the accessibility controller?
No,
or has it got a specific name?
No, I think it's got a specific name. I'll dig it out in a sec. But no, that's a fantastic point, and that's probably long overdue an upgrade, I think. I mean, I know it was very modular.
Adaptive controller. That's what it's called.
That's it. Adaptive. Yeah, that's a very good point, actually.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I'll be quite interested to see what they do. I mean, I don't need one. I'm fortunate enough I don't need to have one, but again, we know people in the community, and as well as other people that you see online through videos and stuff, that do need it and they want to game and they can't. So these systems I think are fantastic. So I'd like to see, because I think there was a survey a few months ago that Microsoft sent out to certain people that was publicized about they want to have feedback on the adaptive side of things because they want to improve it as well. So it sounds like they're quite active in trying to want to do that anyway. So hopefully, whether there's an adaptive controller version 2 coming out, that'd be quite cool to see. And see, again, not just for Xbox, because I think people have been able to literally, pun intended, adapt them to for people to be able to play like the PlayStation and Nintendo Switch as well. So it's not just Xbox. I think that does require a bit of know-how and tech knowledge to make that work. But the point is, it works, right? So it'd be quite cool to see how that works.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's really cool. You know what? We got some great suggestions there, because when I saw this, I was thinking, I couldn't really get my mind off the Elite Series 3, if I'm honest, because I really dig the Elite Series controllers. And just can we come to Kayasanti's comment about you can actually map any of the buttons to the share button using the controller app. Now, when I first tried this, that share button didn't exist as an option, so I think that's something that's happened, and he seems to think that might have been in the December update. So anyone with a series, well, at least a series 2 and probably series 1, looks like you can actually map the share button nowadays. I didn't realize you could. Have you tried doing that, Luke, just out of interest?
No, I haven't. No, I didn't know you could do that.
No, so, I looked, and when you choose a button, you can then choose what button you want it mapped to. I swear the share button wasn't there when I first looked, but that's when I first got the Series X. So perhaps I looked a bit too soon. No, that's cool. Excellent. How are we caught up with the chat, Pucks?
Yeah, pretty much. Just one extra comment I had here from Matt Burns, who said that their favourite headset was the drop Sennheiser PC38X, which cost $169. It was wired. Sounds fantastic plugged into a controller. Can't beat an open back headphone.
Yeah, Sennheiser makes some fantastic cans.
But outside of that, we're caught up on the chat so far.
Excellent. Okay, well, let's just do 2 more topics. We'll make them fairly quick, and I think we'll come to you first, Scott, because I saw a comment on Twitter that I think this might press your buttons slightly. GTA 5, next gen version of GTA 5. Looks like you won't be purchasing that. What's your take on them re-releasing GTA 5 for another console generation?
Yeah, I know exactly which comment you're referring to. And the problem that I've got is I've already bought GTA 5 twice, and I've
Me too.
refused to give them any more money. So I bought GTA 5 on the 360 mainly because I wanted to play heists.
Well, it was at the very tail end of the 360 era, wasn't it, as well?
Yeah, and I don't think heists came out for, well, long after the Xbox One version came out. And then I think it took them that long that I'd already given up on GTA 5. And yeah, I'm not going to give Rockstar any more money for another version of the same game. I mean, to give them some credit, they did add some, upgrades. It obviously looked nicer, and it did have the first person mode as well. But personally, I'm not really that big on GTA games. It was really that heist element that they were going to introduce, or did introduce, in GTA 5 that I was really interested in. I'm not really bothered about the multiplayer stuff. I don't like the way GTA games control or handle or anything like that personally. But
they're a little bit clumsy, aren't they? A little bit clunky.
Yeah, it's just it's kind of like it's got a bit of everything. It's got driving, it's got flying, it's got running, it's got shooting, but none of it feels good. It all just
jack
feels,
of all trades.
Yeah, just a little bit okay, a little meh. But because it took them so long to get heists out, I didn't actually end up playing heists.
Oh, really?
I bought it twice with the intention of playing heists, but it just took them so long to release that update that by the time it came around, I'd already sold. They were actually probably two of the last games I bought physically, if I remember correctly. To be honest,
oh wow,
I ended up getting rid of them, and I haven't actually ended up playing it. So yeah, I don't think I'll be giving Rockstar any more money just to be disappointed. I just have to hold off again. Plus, it's kind of one of those games, obviously, now where that entire game, it's just a short card economy now, isn't it? It's all about the GT Online and being able to sell short cards. They haven't released any sort of single player DLC like maybe a lot of people hoped as well. So yeah, I don't think I'll be going down that well. I've never actually been that big fan of Rockstar games. That might come as a surprise to a lot of people. Honestly, my favorite game that Rockstar have ever released is table tennis on the Xbox 360. I don't know if you remember that game.
I certainly do.
Yeah.
I've got a very intriguing question. What's your take on Red Dead 2 then?
Well, actually, I should probably say I haven't played it, so please take whatever I say with a bit of a grain of salt.
No, that's fine.
But there's a reason I haven't played it. It's just that sort of slow-paced game, and such a large world game doesn't really interest us too much. I mean, just in general, I'm not big on sort of massive, 60 to 100-hour open world games. I wouldn't play some of the more recent Assassin's Creed titles for that very same reason. But yeah, just nothing about sort of Red Dead's really intrigued us, if I'm being perfectly honest. So I've not actually jumped in. I did play a little bit of the first one, and that never really grabbed us, so I never really intended to go back. So yeah, Rockstar just aren't a developer I'm particularly fond of. But yeah, like I say, please take what I say with a little bit of a grain of salt, because I haven't played Red Dead 2 to really comment on it. So
no, that's absolutely fine. That's your opinion. You're absolutely entitled to it. And you know what? I had exactly the same opinion of Red Dead 2. It was actually my partner's son that convinced me to give it another go. I bought it when it first came out, and it wasn't the right time of my life for me to be picking up a game of that magnitude and give it the sort of time that it deserves. So it wasn't until fairly recently that I actually picked it up and gave it another go, and it actually ends up being my game of the generation and also my favorite Rockstar game. But I am of a similar opinion that I do struggle with the GTAs a little bit, and it is because of the janky sort of control system. It's not, as we've already found out on Halo, it's not the typical kind of Call of Duty type controls that lots of games kind of adopt nowadays, and they tend to do their own thing, and it takes a little bit of a brain shift to get into that gear, perhaps. But Luke, will you be purchasing it yet again, or is it time that you think that that this cash cow has been milked dry and they really need to knuckle down and get GTA 6 out the door?
Yeah, no, I won't be. I won't be purchasing it again. So I'm pretty much in the same boat as Scott on Rockstar games in general. And I had, I bought GTA 5 for the 360, as I think most people did. And then I ended up buying it once more when it was quite cheap for the PC to see, what that looked like.
Yeah.
And it was very nice. But they aren't games that typically I find incredible. Like there's certain aspects that are, and I think just to kind of segue a little into the Red Dead 2 point, which is that I played and finished that game, Red Dead 2. I played Red Dead the first one as well. And Red Dead 2 was like the epitome to me of like a 7 out of 10 game.
Okay.
Wow.
That's fair.
How many hours did you point of that, Luke?
About 55-ish.
Yeah, that's a lot of hours to come to the conclusion that it's 7 out of 10 is good. I mean, but like that's a lot of time to put into a game that wasn't world class or
I've got an interesting question then, Luke. Was you bought into the story between Red Dead 2 and 1? Let's put it in that order because that's the order they actually happen in. Was you bought into the story, or was it a bit of a chore to play?
So I love the story of both games. Red Dead 2 especially. It's fantastic, and I love in both, but particularly Red Dead 2, the world. I mean, it's like the most impressive open world there is, right? It feels so alive. It looks so good. And that's, for me, that's all like a 10 out of 10 experience. All of that. What brings it down is gameplay. Which is like a really low experience. And that goes again back to Scott's point, right? And it's not just like the feel of the shooting or mechanics in general. It's the whole Rockstar mission design, which is just so woefully and painfully outdated at this point.
Yes, I agree.
You start a mission, you can't approach it in any way you'd like. If you even so much as think about thinking outside of the box and doing something else, you fail.
It's what, you're absolutely right, because for such an open world that is genuinely open for I don't know 20%, for about 80% of the game, those ones where you're playing missions that you have to do, they are so on the rails that you're right. It is quite jarring, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing which brings it down for me to like that 7 out of 10 mark, and I think people have different experiences with that. So I was absolutely delighted when it didn't win Game of the Year and God of War won it, because despite being biased towards God of War, it is by far the better game in terms of how it plays alone than Red Dead. So I won't be buying GTA 5. I suspect GTA 6 is a long way away. I think Jason Schreier has reported that they've changed the culture at Rockstar, especially. So it might take a bit longer. It might not be as quote unquote ambitious out of the
changes at the top as well, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. So I think when it does release, I do suspect that they will make some of these gameplay changes that people have criticized for a long time, right? Because these criticisms haven't just been recent. They've been going on since the early GTAs.
Yeah, that's a fair
I prefer just to do that. But, GTA 5, I mean, it makes them so much money. It's a no-brainer that they would release another patch for it and get some more money out of it.
Yeah, no, I do agree. It's just, surely the people that, they've turned it into a service game, haven't they? Which is, I never saw that coming. I've got to be honest. And I'm not convinced they really did. I think it's kind of blown up. I know they tried doing that with Red Dead 2 and it's kind of failed miserably, isn't it? So they're sticking with GTA 5, which is fair enough. But I guess for me personally, it just feels like that, like I said, that cash cow has been milked so dry that surely everyone that plays it has had a gutful and wouldn't want to spend a load of money just for slightly prettier visuals. I don't know. Perhaps I'm wrong. What's your take, Pucks?
Are we talking about GTA still, or the Red Dead stuff?
Well, either really. Whatever.
I'll jump on the GTA wagon actually, because I think again I'm the same as the other two. I bought GTA 5 on the 360, played it and loved it. But then I didn't actually buy it again after that. But I did claim it. So
when PlayStation Plus.
Well, no. When I got my PS4 back in 2015, it came as a bundle with 2 games. It was the Nathan Drake collection and GTA 5. So I had no intention of jumping in again because I knew I played it on the 360. At the time, I played the Nathan Drake collection, loved all of those games. I finished them, and then I thought, I've got no other games to play. I'll jump on this one because at the time they as they said now, it's not just a port. They're going to add new stuff to it and all this kind of stuff. And they said that back then. Whereas, on the PS4 and Xbox One versions, they had like a first-person mode and obviously updated graphics and better lighting and stuff. So I played it just to try that out, and then ended up playing the whole game again and then really enjoying it. But I never actually had PlayStation Plus because there was never any real multiplayer games I wanted to play. So it seemed like a waste of money. So I only played the single-player side of things. So I never really got around to playing heists until I started playing GTA a third time when it went for free on the Epic Games Store on PC. So I started playing the story again, but then mainly jumped into the multiplayer modes, which I enjoyed. But as you say, it's very good in that you can just run around, do whatever you want. There's other players that can obviously interact with you or kill you or whatever else. But then you also have the other side of the coin, which is you start off with nothing and you're playing with players which have millions in the bank. They've done all the heists and they just have everything they can get. I mean, I know more recently there's obviously the updates that, if you just need to log on and you get $1 million of in-game money every month or something like that. So there are ways to catch up now, but you still have to go through that process and stuff. And I've seen in the chat as well about the janky controls. I mean, as much as I agree with that, they kind of fit the GTA kind of flow, if you get what I mean. Like, the game isn't super fast paced. I don't think it needs precise controls, so I think it does work. But I also agree with what Luke is saying, is that there are elements of the controls as well as the general gameplay mechanics and story which need to change. But one thing I would like to bring up, which hasn't been mentioned yet, is have you guys seen about the rumours that there might be GTA 3 and Vice City remasters as well as GTA 6?
No, I haven't. I think Vice City would be a good one.
Because I loved Vice City. I played that to death. So to see that all upscaled would be quite cool. But I'd be interested to see if that is true and has any basis. I'd quite like to see if they do anything with like the size of the map and stuff. I mean, I don't think they will do, but it's also a good look into the past of when that looked like it was a massive game. But you go back into it now, and it's only the smallest like square of a map compared to, as you say, Red Dead 2 or GTA 5 or, I don't know, Breath of the Wild or whatever else. And I suppose another separate thing, Scott, I also did play the table tennis game. And actually, it was you, Flap, that bought it for me for Christmas, I think back in 2008 or something.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
So I very much loved that game as well. That was good fun.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to my version of that.
Mine's misplaced somewhere, I think, as well.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a huge game, and it is such a strange game. Or even at the time, I remember everyone thinking, "What the hell is this from Rockstar?" Because we're expecting GTA's, and there's a table tennis game. It's just the bizarrest thing, But
it was actually quite good. That's the thing.
Yeah, it was.
It was really good. It was really good.
Brilliant.
If I remember correctly, was it something to do with they were building a new engine and it was kind of like the first game in a new engine?
It very much felt like that.
Something along those lines. My memory's a bit fuzzy, but I seem to remember something like that.
I wonder if it was a tech demo that they just expanded into a game then.
Yeah, and because it was just table tennis, it looked bloody ridiculous at the time as well. It was one of those. It was one of the first games I can recall. With the sweat tech, where you could see the beads and sweat on the players' heads and things like that. It looked ridiculous, but it was just an awful lot of fun to play as well.
I wonder if it was a physics engine they were testing.
No, it was actually the Rage engine. So it was the first. It was the engine that they use to this day on Red Dead 2, etc. It was the first incarnation of that engine, and that was one of the motivational reasons to.
That's pretty cool, isn't it? Anyone that's relatively new to Red Dead 2 and likes and loves the game, to think that came from a table tennis game. That's pretty cool. So we talked, kind of on this subject. I've got a list of games that are getting Series X upgrades in 2021. So I will read them out. We've got Assetto Corsa Competizione. I've not played that game, actually. It looks pretty good. It's coming in 2021. Crash Bandicoot 4, it's about time. Coming on March the 12th, apparently. It's getting a Series X upgrade. Cyberpunk 2077. I was surprised to see this on the list. Apparently, that's down as second half of 2021 in inverted commas.
Feel lucky.
Yeah, exactly. We'll come back to that, perhaps. Doom Eternal, to be decided. Is that what TBD stands for? 2021, Ghost Runner 2021, Grand Theft Auto GTA 5 second half of 2021, Greedfall Hellpoint, Little Nightmares 2, Marvel Avengers, that's coming in March. Metro Exodus, I'm intrigued to see that one, particularly if they can get the ray tracing to look as beautiful as it did in that E3 demo, and also if they're implementing something like deep learning for the up-res so that we can get it at a decent frame rate as well. That could look fantastic. Mortal Shell, Samurai Shodown, Elder Scrolls Online. I was quite surprised to see that. I don't quite know. I mean, it's not the prettiest game to look at. It's certainly not as pretty as a sort of a dedicated Elder Scrolls game, but interesting to see what they do. Outer Worlds, I'm surprised that they're spending a lot of time and effort on the Outer Worlds. I kind of thought that game was, not that it was dead, but most people that were going to play it have probably played it, considering it's also on Game Pass, but that's getting a Series X upgrade. The Persistence, Witcher 3, I can't believe Witcher 3 that says 2021. I think they should be busy getting to a Cyberpunk 2077 sorted before they consider Witcher 3. Another game that I didn't really think needed it was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. That's coming in March. I'm not really sure because I think that runs at 60 frames already. I'm guessing it's not 4K, but and Warframe was the last one. So any surprises in that list, gents? Anything that seems a bit pointless other than most of them?
I think I agree with you personally. I mean, it's good that they're doing it. Don't get me wrong. And if anything, it probably, rather than it maybe needing to be done, it could well be used as almost like a marketing tool to say that, look, this game's also now, it now runs on a Series X and has that power unlocked, and you can, witness this game in higher fidelity and blah blah blah, all the marketing speech. And maybe it's a way to get people to, well, it's a way to advertise your game again for a start, and maybe people will then jump in. So it could be that angle, perhaps.
Well, perhaps they're feeling that people feel like they're lacking next-gen experiences. I mean, the strange one for me is Elder Scrolls Online, really. I can't really see the point. I mean, essentially, it's a free game anyway. And you don't really play it for its amazing graphics, I don't think. I don't know. What do you think, Luke? What's your take on that?
Yeah, no, I think I agree with that. I guess it's nice for the people that do, but it's not.
Yeah,
you're not going to see that as a non-player and go, well, I've got to go and play Elder Scrolls Online now, because it's I think more just to support the player.
The reason I mentioned it was free is because I'm wondering if some of these studios are actually going to use this as an angle again to sort of charge you for an upgrade.
Yeah, potentially. I think some of them have already come out and said that they're not. I feel like the Crash Bandicoot one's a free upgrade if you've already got the.
Yes, that was mentioned on the video, actually, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I suspect something like the Doom Eternal one will be as well. It tend to be good with that.
Actually, that's a good point. I'm guessing anything in well, perhaps we can't quite assume that, but I would assume that most things that are in Game Pass, particularly the first-party studios, so like you say, Doom Eternal and Outer Worlds,
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the other ones. The Metro Exodus one's, I think, one of the most exciting ones. Yeah. Whether you're on console or PC, because that's getting a PC patch as well to support further features. And on console, I think haven't they said that it's going to be 4K 60 and support ray tracing, i.e., all in a single mode.
What worries me, but what worries me about that is the stability of that. And this is why I can't help but think that they really need to implement some deep learning and super sampling to get that resolution up and keep the frame rate if they're going down the ray tracing route.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially because they've, I think it's the ray traced global illumination that they're bringing to consoles in particular, which is an incredibly demanding feature.
Not just shadows like Call of Duty.
Yeah, it's not just some small thing. It's like an entire change to the lighting model, and it's quite demanding. It looks incredible, by the way. It looks absolutely incredible. But yeah, as you say, I mean, there's no way it's going to be native 4K on consoles running that. It's going to be some, Op-Res or something like that. But so that's an exciting one. The Cyberpunk and Witcher ones are quite laughable. Like, I don't know, like the Cyberpunk one, who knows when that's going to come? And I think by extension, who knows when the Witcher one's going to come? Because it's the same studio. So
yeah.
Given the recent hacking scandals as well, which have pushed their work back, it makes you wonder, as you say, when release will actually be.
Yeah, exactly. Cyberpunk is just all hands on deck to actually get it to work properly,
Exactly.
let alone. So so there's some interesting ones in there, but it's again, I think it's good. I think it's good that these upgrades are coming, and as long as they're free or easy to upgrade to and very cheap, then I think it's a win-win all around, because at least then you can, you've got further evidence of that this is a next-gen console, right?
Exactly. I mean, perhaps it's just, particularly for something like Elder Scrolls Online, perhaps it's just a relatively cheap way of injecting some, interest back into a franchise that may be flagging slightly, should we say? It's interesting. Scott, anything on that list that came as a surprise? Anything that's missing off the list, perhaps?
Nothing that really stands out, if I'm being perfectly honest, Flap. I think, as you have touched on, Exodus is kind of the one I'm most interested in. I'll pick that up mainly just to see how it looks. I probably won't play the game too much, but I'm really curious just to see some proper ray tracing in a console game to see how that looks. I'm really curious how that's going to look on Series S, actually, because they've said that's going to include the same ray tracing features on S as it will on X. At 60, I think at 1080 or maybe in 1440. I can't remember exactly what they said, but it's going to be really interesting to see sort of how the Series S handles that. But I think looking at the rest of the list that you've put on, there's nothing really stands out to me personally. I have been meaning to play Doom Eternal. So I'll probably hold off until that updates out. I think I played the original Doom just last year, so that's probably one that stands
out. That was the one I was going to bring up, Scott, actually. I mean, if you haven't played that, I mean, it is so silky smooth. I appreciate that a lot of it is probably down to motion blur and stuff like that. It's a fantastic game for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it seems so silky smooth. So I cannot believe that it's a frame rate, unless they're pumping it up to 120 FPS. That could be a thing. But I can only imagine that what's left to do is the resolution.
Yeah, just cranking the settings up and maybe just rather than maybe doing some sort of checkerboarding, being native 4K possibly. I think the only thing I would mention, actually, because Luke mentioned, I think Luke just touched on it there, is just how these games are charged now. You mentioned Tony Hawk there, Flap. So I think for Tony Hawk, one of the things that they're introducing is a 120 FPS mode at 1080p, which is interesting. I kind of associate 120 FPS with more competitive games, and shooters and things like that, where they can maybe be an advantage. But for Tony Hawk, I think unless you've already bought the deluxe edition, which is a 10 or more expensive, if I remember correctly, you don't get this. You've got to pay £10 to get basically upgrade your version to the deluxe version to get the next gen upgrade. So it's interesting how different publishers are treating these completely different. You've got Smart Delivery, which I think is actually a little bit I don't think it gets enough praise, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, you've got some publishers who are charging, some are offering it completely free. So there's still a little bit of uncertainty around exactly what you actually get for the game. But nothing really stands out. I think I'm more interested in sort of what's new that's coming more than maybe what's old and getting updated at this point.
Yeah, no, absolutely fair point. And I completely agree, to be honest. Pucks, was there anything on the list that you would be willing to spend money to have the next gen version of?
Nothing extra, if I'm honest. I think the only one which I'm going to buy, I want to buy relatively soon anyway, was Crash Bandicoot 4.
Okay.
But again, that's a free upgrade regardless. And to be honest, if that was a separate pay thing, I probably would do, but only because I don't currently own it. If I already had the Xbox One version, then no, they're not big enough upgrades to warrant an extra purchase.
How much more would you be willing to spend to get the next gen version?
Oh god,
roughly, finger in the air.
I don't know, £5 to £10 maybe would be like the maximum.
I think that's probably what they would go for. If it was 15, I wouldn't. I don't know why 10 is the magic number for me. If it was £10 more, I probably would. If it was 15, I probably wouldn't.
Even then, though, I'd have to think about it.
Would you? Yeah, 15 for me. I don't know. Again, I don't know why that seems to be the threshold, but 15 to me would feel like it's taking the piss. I don't know why.
Yeah, no, I agree with that as well.
Out of interest, Crash Bandicoot, that's Activision, isn't it? It was published by Activision, and Tony Hawk was published by Activision.
Yeah.
So they're charging. You need the deluxe version for Tony Hawk, but you don't for Crash Bandicoot. That's interesting. So they've deployed different tactics for two different games. I wonder what the reason behind that is. I wonder if it's just testing the water with two different.
You had to spend more for the upgraded version of Call of Duty as well. So it's something they're used to doing. That they're no stranger to charging more for the next gen version of stuff.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's just interesting that we're going to have two, Tony Hawk and Crash Bandicoot getting next gen upgrades pretty close together, and one you may have to pay for, and one you're not from the same publisher. So, but yeah, they're obviously Activision aren't any strangers to that sort of thing. Yeah, I'm just curious why that might be, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, it's an interesting little nuance, and one that I hadn't picked up on actually. So that's quite interesting to see what might happen there. But I wonder why the difference for those games. But no, that's excellent. Well, thank you very much, gents. I think that kind of wraps the show up for the topics that we've got. We covered a few different ones. Perhaps we'll just come to you last, Pucks, if that's okay, because I think there's a couple of comments that we need to perhaps highlight and discuss.
I've got two saved here if you want me to read them out.
Go on then.
Yeah, so I got one here from Masco. I think Scott might have touched this up in the chat already, but Masco asks,
Scott's not touching things up again, is he?
Sorry. Touched on it in the chat, I should have said. Sorry. But no, Masco asked,
word of him about that.
Did Control get the Xbox Series X update already? I think, Scott, you said it already had done. Is that true? Is that correct?
So Control, the original version for the Xbox One, didn't get an upgrade. You have to get the Ultimate Edition, which is a completely different purchase, even if you bought the original, to get the next-gen version, essentially. So they've kind of locked that behind an entirely new 50, 60 pound release, unfortunately. 505 Games got a lot of flack for that at the time. Their
but just for interest, the Ultimate version is available now for purchase.
Yes. Yeah, you can get that now, but you can't even pay like 10, 15, 20 pound to upgrade your old version. That you've just got to buy it outright, unfortunately, which is a bit of a shame as well. But if you're on PlayStation, at least, then I guess you get that for free, or you got that for free last month. So
cool. What else?
Yep, and then last comment I've got here is from the Indie Gamer, who says, spending money for next gen version, that is a pile of bollocks. No way should I pay.
You know what? And that's I really as comical as the comment is, it's got a very salient point, because obviously we know Indie Gamers. He's a PC gamer, obviously. Can
I just add to it as well? Because Indie also said on PC you pay for the game regardless of what spec you're running. It should be the same for console. Yeah,
and I agree. And Microsoft, they're in a very strange position, because obviously they have the Windows 10 platform, and they're no strangers to the PC and how PCs and things like that work. So to have inherited and run with this sort of archaic console mindset that people like, probably I would probably pin this on Sony back in the early days to a certain degree, and then Microsoft certainly bought into it and never really changed it. But to have this mindset where you can just keep charging people for things that, gold being a classic example, paying to play online, it's just archaic, because any PC players out there get all of this stuff for free. If you want to make the any game look next gen, you have to upgrade your PC, not the game, which, it's expensive, but once you've upgraded it, it works for every game. And once you have, you just get sliders that you move up and down to have Ultra and all of that sort of stuff. I just don't understand why a certain element of that can't bleed over into the console mindset. And I think if Microsoft were to do that would be a real, whoever, not even just Microsoft, if PlayStation were to make the first move, whoever did that first would be an absolute winner, I think, in my opinion. But they'd obviously be losing some revenue out of it, I guess. What's your take, Luke? Go on.
Apologies. I was just going to say, well, that's essentially what smart delivery is, isn't it? You buy one version of the game that works across Xbox One, Xbox One X, Xbox Series S, Xbox Series X. But not only that, they've also got Play Anywhere as well. So you buy one version of the game and you can get it not just on Xbox, you can get it on PC as well. So I think if anyone's at least doing it to some extent at the moment, it is Microsoft are kind of halfway there, if not all the way there, I think, at this point.
I agree. I think they're looking in the right direction. I just don't think they've really made any strides to get where they're looking, if that makes any sense. I do agree. They have, let's go back to the top of the show and topic one. They're still clinging on to this bloody gold thing that's just so archaic. It's just crazy, absolutely crazy. And I guess the irony is whether you're an Xbox player or a PC player, you're actually logging into the same fucking servers. So it's not really, there is no extra cost to be able to do it on console. That cost just doesn't exist other than the fact you can charge it and people pay it. But yeah, sorry, Luke, what's your take on that particular aspect?
Yeah, I think I agree with Indy for the most part on that. I think it's quite galling, particularly when you have certain publishers / developers that give you, a quote unquote next gen upgrade, and it's, a res boost plus maybe a frame rate boost and maybe quicker loading times, and that's what you get. But you're expected to pay money for that. I think that's quite insulting. And then on the other hand, what makes that look even worse is when you have stuff like the Metro Exodus patch coming out, right? Where it's not just a big res boost and a big frame rate boost that you can do at the same time. It's kind of, ray tracing, enhanced graphical settings all around, and it's all free. I think it is quite insulting when you have to sit there and people have bought your game. And the biggest example of this is the Control one, which was just absolutely farcical. Yeah. That people have bought the game, and there's even for people who've bought the game, there's no normal upgrade path. They just essentially have to go, right, okay, well, we need the Ultimate Edition. So, you're effectively penalizing people for supporting your game early in those scenarios, and buying the game on day one. As opposed to people who come into it fresh. So, so I do agree. Obviously, all this stuff, some of this stuff that they do in terms of upgrades, it does take time and money and effort from the publisher, developer, etc. But, you're going to make money off of that anyway by attracting people into buying the game in the first place, right? Because people might be like, well, I'm not really interested in Crash Bandicoot 4 on last-gen consoles, and so I didn't buy it. But now it's getting a next gen upgrade. You might be like, oh, I'm quite interested in that now. I'll probably buy it. So I don't really see the rationale for why. Well, the rationale for why they do it is to make money, but I don't think it's the right thing to do. Not in this, particularly in today's environment, right? It's not. It's a bit galling and it's a bit insulting to be asked to pay, even if it's a nominal amount, even if it's 5-10 quid, and that's not a nominal amount. For some people that's. Quite a lot of money, right? That to just throw on an upgrade for a game that they already own. So,
well, we've not even spoken about the fact that the console games cost more than the PC version in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you
Double
can,
whammy.
You can go out and I mean, again, Control's a great example, right? Yeah. You could go out and buy that for relatively cheap back in the day after it came off Epic Games Store. And you've already got the next gen experience there already. So as compared to the console versions, the Ultimate Edition is just the PC version. Like it's just a PC version amped up. That's all it is. So yeah, exactly. You're not paying for any of this stuff on PC. You get it all for free, and you've already paid less for the game. So I don't see how they expect people to just kind of sit there and go, "Oh yeah, that's fine. I'll pay £10."
But they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a very strange situation. Pucks, we'll come to you next if that's okay. And we've had a couple of great comments actually from the live chat. Let's go to them if we can first.
Yeah, so I'll read these out. So one here from Jayhawk, who says, so that's based on what we've been talking about. That's what Microsoft is trying to do, but it isn't completely up to them. In the past, incompatibility was a problem as well.
I kind of agree, and again, let's stick with using Control as the de facto example here because it ticks so many boxes of wrongdoing, in my opinion. I think that it's not just the platform holders. We can't just hold them to account for this because I think it's become part of the psyche for the publishers as well. That they're fully bought into charging more for the console games and stuff like that. So, even if the platform holders do want to try and leverage and make things a little bit of a more even playing field with regards to PC, then, they're still battling the publishers as well, unfortunately.
Next comment here I have from Kea Sante, who says, problem with Xbox Live Gold is capitalism. They get the money today, so they can't afford to get rid of it, even though they don't technically need that money. When Game Pass numbers rise, they will get rid of it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's probably the thing. It's quite nice to think that Microsoft have an out if that makes sense. And I think that Game Pass is their route and their way of being able to level the playing field, both sort of financially, which is obviously probably their biggest concern, but also, from a consumer perspective as well. I'm just a little concerned that probably PlayStation don't quite have the same out that Microsoft perhaps do with getting that number up. But, they make a crap ton of money, PlayStation. So I'm guessing if it ain't broke, don't fix it at the moment. But I think there's more and more players that are kind of asking these sort of questions, if I'm honest.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up about the PlayStation as well, because I think, if anything, the PS4 numbers were astronomical in terms of the player base. So I think obviously for PlayStation 5, it makes perfect sense that Sony were going to try and rely on that. Whereas right at the beginning, well, even before the series consoles were coming out, we had the conversations about what are Microsoft going to do to catch up, and we're seeing it happen. So it's only a matter of time, I think, maybe when even Sony themselves might start to question what they will change in their own ecosystem as well.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I mean, like you say, it'd be nice to see a fairer playing field for gamers because, at the end of the day, the consumers win, I think, on that score.
Yeah, definitely. That's it for the comments so far. I've not got any more.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I think that kind of wraps up the show, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for tuning and being here. We kind of started off a bit slow with the numbers, but it sort of picked up halfway and got through to the end. So if you want to catch the first half of the show, obviously, tune in afterwards and leave some comments in the comments section below the video. It'd be great to see what people think of the topics we discuss. So thanks for the chat. It's always great. You've raised some really great things today, including fight and flight sticks. We got wrong, but to be honest, it was kind of even the mistake that we made. It was a great answer anyway. But no, it's fantastic. We really enjoyed yesterday's tournament. Had a lot of fun. Really grateful and pleased to be through to the next round. Hopefully, we'll be playing 5 p.m. next Saturday. We'll confirm everything like that on Twitter. We'll be playing midweek mix-up with Wandering Dutch's crew. Let's just quickly flash up on the screen one last time how it currently stands. We've made it through to the quarterfinals. Would be great to make it to the semi-finals, but let's see. I can't help feeling our star players, Luke, Scott, and Puxley. You'll be the ones carrying me through. I can't help but feel that may be the case, but I'll get some practice in this week, boys, I promise. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Scott. Let's just come to you. Thank you for being here, my friend. You're kind of getting quite a big presence on Twitter now. I know you're posting quite a few things, and it's great to see some of the things you're posting because it's some of the things I can use for topics in the show. So I love what you do. Where can people find you?
Well, first of all, that's very, very kind of you, Flap. Thank you very much for that, mate. Appreciate it. But if you don't follow me already, it'd be great if you follow me on Twitter. It's at SX2 Gaming.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, make sure you stick a follow. I can't believe anyone listening to this show isn't following you. But if that is the case, I will stick the Twitter handles down below. Click the links and follow these people because it's fantastic to see some of the stuff that's coming out. Luke, as ever, you are our multi-platform guru. You bring balance and all kinds of things to the chat. I'm really grateful for that and a vast experience and wealth of knowledge. So great to have you on the show. Where can we find you?
Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. And you can find me on Twitter. It's at LukeSteele90. And as always, pleasure to be here and great topics, great panel. Love it.
No, excellent. Well, thank you. And Puxley, you're a multi-platform guru as well. I mean, I span PC and Xbox, but you've got Switch and you've been, part of the PS4 generation and stuff. Oh, just out of interest, I did mean to ask you actually. Ghost of Tsushima, that has an online multiplayer mode, doesn't it now?
It does, yes. And it's very good. And if you have the game, by all means, chat, please try it out. It's good fun.
There we go, Matt. I've answered one of them. You said name 3. I could name 1. I thought of that earlier when you mentioned it. But thank you for being here, Pux.
No, definitely. Yeah.
Sadly, the Green Pass Gaming Twitter handle is still screwed, despite numerous emails and tickets raised to Twitter. They are just not responding. I have no idea why, but it's such a shame, Pux, isn't it?
It is, unfortunately. I was actually going to bring this up, so I'm glad you did. So if anyone is wondering, we are still trying to resolve it. We've got our own kind of backup plans in the background, which say in the next week or 2 at the latest, if we don't get any updates from then we've got our own plans. I think we'll start to execute to kind of reinvigorate and try to push that forward again, so you can reach us all on Twitter from a single point again, rather than from our individual handles. So again, we'll let you all know through our personal channels as and when that does happen. Outside of that, I would like to just thank everyone actually for their support, because I've just noticed we're not big number watchers, and we love that we've built this community, or we'd like to see it grow. And if anything, I'm actually quite shocked that we're only 2 subscribers away from 700, which I think is insane. So, if anything, just a quick plug here to say thank you all very much for subscribing and for tuning in and watching, and get involved in the chat if you do so. And again, and outside of that, thanks to those that actually listen to this on the podcasts outside of the live shows, on the, because we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all the rest of it. And I know that a number of people do listen to us after the show there as well. So thank all of you for your support. I very much appreciate it. And again, as I always say...
How do we know people listen to us on those platforms?
Well, one, because people tell us.
Exactly. I forgot to post a week or two ago, and people were saying, "Where's the podcast?" It's like, oh, people do actually listen to it. That's cool.
Yeah, no, definitely. So that kind of took us by a nice surprise, didn't it? Yeah, so again, thank you very much, everyone, for that. And if you don't know, you can find me on Twitter at PuxleyAR, and I'm free anytime if you want to ask me questions or just have a chat. Let us know, and we'll update you as and when.
No, absolutely. And if one thing that's been highlighted to us is just how much fun we have when we're playing games together, and particularly when we live stream, it's so nice to play a game, have people watching, have comments come in. So Pux and I were playing Battlefield 5 last night. We had Matt Burns watching and had a good chat. I was playing Call of Duty Cold War multiplayer today. I did about I planned to do about half an hour, and I ended up doing about over 2 hours, about 2 hours and 10 minutes, I think it was. So I streamed all of that live. That's all up on the channel if you want to watch that. Anyone who's new to Call of Duty, which I can't believe there's that many, but I kind of go through the history of Call of Duty, and particularly around Cold War and the bits that I look out for in the maps and stuff. So if anyone's interested in playing, probably worth checking out. But we love doing this. I think we plan to do some more live streams of us actually playing games, because let's face it, at the end of the day, that's what we're in this amazing community for. But fantastic. Well, that wraps up this week's show, everyone. Thank you very much for listening. Please do like, share, and subscribe. Visit everyone's Twitter handle. Follow those guys on our panel, and we'll do it all again next week. See you then. Take care.